and we're live with pie and revolutionary politics, but mostly pie.
Pie and Revolution.
So we are going to be playing Fable 3 tonight. As you can see, it's a little smaller than normal.
Uh-huh.
You have a decidedly...
Uh-huh.
I should probably just go make pie, right?
Let's let people know who maybe weren't here last time exactly what we're doing tonight.
No context. We're making pie. We're playing Fable 3. I'm gonna turn the game down because the game is not what's important in terms of audio. It's still gonna be there, but it's gonna be quieter.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Sorry, just give me 1 sec.
Oh, let me give you a tash. Come on.
Is it this way? No. I never remember where bread is, or pie. I've found pie. Alright, I'm gonna start making pie.
You've started the pie?
I will be.
Okay, so for
every second counts for pie. Hello, Fen.
Hey, Fen.
Oh god, I've gotta get good at pie making again.
You do have to get good at pie making.
Gotta get really good at pie making.
Okay. So for those who maybe weren't here last time or aren't necessarily aware, who are watching this later or whatever, really. What we're doing today is we are going to make enough money to be a good monarch. And now
a thing that every monarch says.
In the world of Fable 3, this is genuinely a thing because we have to pay people to defend their homes from the darkness. And we have to have enough money in the bank to do that, but we don't want to pass any policies that deny people social services.
What if I simply tax more people? I'm a great monarch.
So, the idea is, on Claire's side of things, she will be doing pie making, basically, which is one of the best ways to make a lot of money very quickly in this video game. Meanwhile, I will be reading at least the opening of The Conquest of Bread by Peter Kropotkin, a kind of formative anarcho-communist thinker. I have no knowledge of Kropotkin, so don't expect me to be the one giving detailed historical information, but I will be reading the book, or at least the start of the book.
Will we have breaks to like discuss? Because I'm gonna be trying to listen while I'm pie making, and it might be to the detriment of pie, but I do want to listen to the Conquest of Bread as well.
We're definitely going to be having breaks throughout our reading.
Excellent.
As well as, feel free chat in the chat if you're here. We're just gonna be reading, but I'll make sure that we have some breaks. I believe that there's some like line breaks in the original thing. If not, we'll make our own. Just like we're making our own pie. So yeah. I'm gonna start with the preface because I think that prefaces are important. Let me just actually see how long the preface is.
Long
that's
preface.
Not unbelievably long.
Oh fuck! I was looking at your.
You can't be looking at my
I'm
screen.
sorry, I got really excited.
I'm gonna start with the preface because I do think that prefaces are important. This is a preface from 1906 from Kent Broadley, who I believe seemingly may have translated it into English. I don't know exactly. But we're gonna start with the preface, and then we're gonna get into it. All right. The preface of The Conquest of Bread. One of the current objections to communism and socialism altogether is that the idea is so old and yet it could never be realized. Schemes of ideal states haunted the thinkers of ancient Greece. Later on, the early Christians joined in communist groups. Centuries later, large communist brotherhoods came into existence during the Reform movement. Then, the same ideals were revived during the great English and French revolutions. And finally, quite lately, in 1848, a revolution, inspired to a great extent with socialist ideals, took place in France. And yet, you see, we are told, how far away is still the realization of your schemes? Don't you think that there is some fundamental error in your understanding of human nature and its needs? At first sight, this objection seems very serious. However, the moment we consider human history more attentively, it loses its strength. We see first that hundreds of millions of men have succeeded in maintaining amongst themselves in their village communities for many hundreds of years one of the main elements of socialism, the common ownership of the chief instrument of production, the land, and the apportionment of the same according to the labor capacities of the different families. And we learned that, if not the communal possession of the land has been destroyed in Western Europe, it was not. Sorry. And we learned that if the communal possession of the land has been destroyed in Western Europe, it was not from within, but from without, by the governments which created a land monopoly in favor of the nobility and the middle classes. We learn, moreover, that the medieval cities succeeded in maintaining in their midst, for several centuries in succession, a certain socialized organization of production and trade, that these centuries were periods of a rapid intellectual, industrial, and artistic progress, and that the decay of these communal institutions came mainly from the incapacity of men of combining the village with the city, the peasant with the citizen, so as jointly to oppose the growth of the military states which destroyed the free cities. The history of mankind, thus understood, does not offer then an argument against communism. It appears, on the contrary, as a succession of endeavors to realize some sort of communist organization, endeavors which were crowned with a partial success of a certain duration. And all we are authorized to conclude is that mankind has not yet found the proper form for combining, on communistic principles, agriculture with a suddenly developed industry and a rapidly growing international trade. The latter appears especially as a disturbing element, since it is no longer individuals only or cities that enrich themselves by distant commerce and export, but whole nations grow rich at the cost of those nations which lag behind in their industrial development. These conditions, which began to appear by the end of the 18th century, took, however, their full swing in the 19th century only, after the Napoleonic Wars came to an end, and modern communism had to take them into account. It is now known that the French Revolution, apart from its political significance, was an attempt made by the French people in 1793 and 1794 in three different directions, more or less akin to socialism. It was, first, the equalization of fortunes by means of an income tax and succession duties, both heavily progressive, as also by a direct confiscation of the land in order to subdivide it, and by heavy war taxes levied upon the rich only. The second attempt was to introduce a wide national system of rationally established prices of all commodities, for which the real cost of production and moderate trade profits had to be taken into account. The convention worked hard at this scheme, and had nearly completed its work, when reaction took the overhand. And the third was a sort of municipal communism, as regards the consumption of some objects of first necessity, bought by the municipalities and sold by them at cost price. It was during this remarkable movement, which has never yet been properly studied, that modern socialism was born. Fourierism with Lange at Lyon, and authoritarian communism with Buonarroti, Babeuf, and their comrades. And it was immediately after the Great Revolution that the three great theoretical founders of modern socialism, Fourier, Saint-Simon, and Robert Owen, as well as Godwin, the no-state socialism, came forward, while the secret communist societies, originated from those of Buonarroti and Babeuf, gave their stamp to militant communism for the next 50 years. To be correct, then, we must say that modern socialism is not yet 100 years old, and that, for the first half of these 100 years, two nations only, which stood at the head of the industrial movement, i.e., Britain and France, took part in its elaboration. Both bleeding at the time from the terrible wounds inflicted upon them by 15 years of Napoleonic Wars, and both enveloped in the great European reaction that had come from the East. In fact, it was only after the Revolution of July, 1830, in France, and the Reform movement of 1830 to 32 in England had shaken off that terrible reaction that the discussion of socialism became possible for the next 16 to 18 years. And it was during those years that the aspirations of Fourier, Saint Simon, and Robert Owen, worked out by their followers, took a definite shape, and the different schools of socialism which exist nowadays were defined. In Britain, Robert Owen and his followers worked out their schemes of communist villages, agricultural and industrial at the same time. Immense cooperative associations were started for creating with their dividends more communist colonies, and the great consolidated trades union was founded, the forerunner of the labor parties of our day and the International Working Men's Association. In France, the Fourier Considerant issued his remarkable manifesto, which contains, beautifully developed, all the theoretical considerations upon the growth of capitalism, which are now described as scientific socialism. Proudhon worked out his idea of anarchism and mutualism without state interference. Louis Blanc published his Organization of Labor, which became later on the program of Lassalle in Germany. Vidal in France and Laurence Stein in Germany further developed in two remarkable works published in 1846 and 1847 respectively, the theoretical conceptions of Considerant, and finally Vidal and especially Pequer, the latter in a very elaborate work, as also in a series of reports, developed in detail the system of collectivism, which he wanted the Assembly of 1848 to vote in the shape of laws. I'm going to take a break here and just say, first of all, this is not actually Kropotkin. This is someone else who translated the work. It's
Okay.
extremely... Here is the detailed history of all of this and nothing about the book.
Yeah, so far we've just gotten a history lesson.
Yeah, this really is a history lesson.
I was gonna ask you to like summarize because I've been busy making pies and only half listening. But it sounds like the summary is we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. This person believes that the closest that they came was the French Revolution and also the English Revolution, which I don't know exactly which one they're referring to there. I think they must be referring to the Cromwell one. Yeah, this is the preface, Fenrir. I figured it might have some details about the thing. It appears to not.
Should we skip it?
I'm thinking at this point I may skip the rest.
How far are we? Are we like a quarter through? Are we...
It looks like halfway through.
Let's skip it.
Let's skip it.
Yeah. Let's get to the bread making. I've been failing. I don't know if anyone's been keeping tabs on me, but I have failed 3 pies and this is unacceptable.
I mean, it happens. It happens.
Sets me back so far. It's like it's so fast to make $3,000 every pie.
Yeah, it seems like a lot. Oh my god, it's really the wildest way that this game is built. It's a really wild way this game is built.
4 pies.
You're gonna fail some. It's okay. It's okay.
I don't want to. I refuse.
Failure is a part of the revolution. Okay. Okay, let's get actually into it. Let's get into Kropotkin. Chapter 1, Our Riches. 1. The human race has traveled far since those bygone ages when men used to fashion their rude implements of flint and lived on the precarious spoils of the chase, leaving to their children for their only heritage a shelter beneath the rocks, some poor utensils, and nature vast, ununderstood, and terrific, with whom they had to fight for their wretched existence. During the agitated times which have elapsed since, and which have lasted for many thousand years, mankind has nevertheless amassed untold treasures. It has cleared the land, dried the marshes, pierced the forests, made roads. It has been building, inventing, observing, reasoning. It has created a complex machinery, wrested her secrets from nature, and finally it has made a servant of steam. And the result is that now the child of the civilized man finds ready, at its birth, to his hand an immense capital accumulated by those who have gone before him. And this capital enables him to acquire, merely by his own labor, combined with the labors of others, riches surpassing the dreams of the Orient, expressed in the fairy tales of the Thousand and One Nights. The soil is cleared to a great extent, fit for the reception of the best seeds, ready to make a rich return for the skill and labor spent upon it, a return more than sufficient for all the wants of humanity. The methods of cultivation are known. On the wide prairies of America, each 100 men, with the aid of powerful machinery, can produce in a few months enough wheat to maintain 10,000 people for a whole year. And where man wishes to double his produce, to treble it, to multiply it 100-fold, he makes the soil, gives to each plant the requisite care, and thus obtains enormous returns. While the hunter of old had to scour 50 or 60 square miles to find food for his family, the civilized man supports his household, with far less pains and far more certainty, on 1,000th part of that space. Climate is no longer an obstacle. When the sun fails, man replaces it by artificial heat, and we see the coming of a time when artificial light also will be used to stimulate vegetation. Meanwhile, by
What
the
the
use
fuck?
of
When was this
glass,
written?
90, I believe this one, it was translated in 1907.
Wow.
Yeah, did you not
This
know? This is
this
old.
predates. Yeah, I mean I knew, but this predates greenhouses, doesn't it?
I believe so.
He
Yes.
I'm just he predicted correct. Is the thing.
I think he's talking about like sun lamps, like lamps for plants.
Lamps for plants, yeah.
Yeah.
Plant lamps.
Um.
Anyways, sorry, keep going. I
No,
got
it's all
really
good.
amazed by him predicting greenhouses.
I don't think it's greenhouses. He's also greenhouses have predicted for have existed for a while.
Fair.
I
Fair,
believe.
fair, fair.
I believe he is specifically talking about like electricity being used to light plants, which is also a thing that he did predict.
Mm-hmm.
Um. Meanwhile, by the use of glass and hot water pipes, man renders a given space 10 and 50 times more productive than it was in its natural state. The prodigies accomplished in industry are still more striking. With the cooperation of those intelligent beings, modern machines, themselves the fruit of 3 or 4 generations of inventors, mostly unknown, 100 men manufacture now the stuff to clothe 10,000 persons for a period of 2 years. In well-managed coal mines, the labor of 100 miners furnishes each year enough fuel to warm 10,000 families under an inclement sky. And we have lately witnessed twice the spectacle of a wonderful city springing up in a few months at Paris without interrupting in the slightest degree the regular work of the French nation. This is referring to the International Paris Exhibitions of 1889 and 1900. That's what he's talking about there. Um, uh, and if in manufactures, as in agriculture, and as indeed through our whole social system, the labor, the discoveries, and the inventions of our ancestors profit chiefly the few, it is none the less certain that mankind in general, aided by the creatures of steel and iron which it already possesses, could already procure an existence of wealth and ease for every one of its members. Truly, we are rich, far richer than we think, rich in what we already possess, richer still in the possibilities of production of our actual mechanical outfit, richest of all in what we might win from our soil, from our manufactures, from our science, from our technical knowledge, were they but applied to bringing about the well-being of all. So I'm going to take a break there. Hi, Seda. We are
Hello.
reading The Conquest of Bread by Peter Kropotkin. It's a anarcho-communist foundational text. So
And
far,
I'm
we've
making
read.
pie.
Yeah, Claire is making pie in Fable 3 to attempt to both provide social services and also defend the nation against the darkness which is coming.
A thing that every monarch should have to do.
I think that
IMO.
every monarch should have to do. Yeah, and we've read so far about how we are very, very rich because we have the ability to produce a lot of stuff very quickly.
I think. Oh, fuck. I started talking and then I fucked up pie making. I think this
No
is
worries.
so interesting because, like, it's basically like, oh, we can finally do the revolution with the technology that we have. And it's interesting to think about, like, the framing of that because, like, that is kind of how I felt about computers. It's like, oh, we can finally, like, do the revolution now that we have, like, computers. So, like, I don't know. I don't know if I have a conclusion to that. I'm just like, wait a second. Does everybody feel like this about the new technology of their time?
I think
Hey,
so.
is gardening the computer of the 1800s?
I mean, this is the Industrial Revolution, right? The gardening is not. It's industry that is. It is the ability to. It is mass production. It is.
Okay, but in a way, gardening is the computer of the 1800s. The loom.
No,
Yes, thank you. The
Fenrir
loom.
says,
Yeah,
the
the
loom
loom.
was.
Well,
yes.
I think organized agriculture predates the loom, right? Actually, I don't know if that's true.
Organized
Which one came
agriculture.
first?
Organized agriculture is like old, super old.
Okay.
It
Okay.
is so
I would say
old.
this is like computer 1, and then loom is computer 2, and then computers are computer 3.
Everything's computers, is what you're saying.
If you really think about it, everything's computers.
Okay, I'm gonna continue.
Number 2. Okay, cool.
Looms have been around thousands of years. Yes, it was an industrial kind of level that they were taken to in this era, though.
Right. This is why I wasn't sure. Like, looms are like old as fuck, and I was like, wait, did looms actually come first? But I don't know.
Seda says if you can make a computer in Minecraft, said in old times they can make computers with garden. That makes sense to me.
That's computer 4. Minecraft computer is computer.
You know how they plug in they do potato clocks, potato clocks?
Yeah.
You can make a computer with potatoes.
Yeah, and as I didn't read who said it on making pies, but as Ada Lovelace made like punch cards. That is one of the computers.
Lord Byron's daughter. What an icon.
God, I always forget that. That's a fucked up fact.
It's my favorite fact. Her mom wanted so desperately for her to not turn into Lord Byron that she made her do a bunch of math, and she went off and did a bunch of math.
She just invented computers. Fuck
and
yeah.
She invented computers. That's how hard her mom did not want her to become like Byron. Anyway, yes, the punch card loom was in fact the modern computer. So yes, this was that era. Good memory. I had forgotten. All right. Section 2. We in civilized societies are rich. Why then are the many poor? Why this painful drudgery for the masses? Why, even to the best paid workmen, this uncertainty for the morrow in the midst of all the wealth inherited from the past, and in spite of the powerful means of production which could ensure comfort to all in return for a few hours of daily toil? The socialists have said it and repeated it unwearyingly. Daily they reiterate it, demonstrating it by arguments taken from all the sciences. It is because all that is necessary for production, the land, the mines, the highways, machinery, food, shelter, education, knowledge, all have been seized by the few in the course of that long story of robbery, enforced migration, and wars of ignorance and oppression, which has been the life of the human race before it has learned to subdue the forces of nature. It is because, taking advantage of alleged rights acquired in the past, these few appropriate today 2/3 of the products of human labor, and then squander them in the most stupid and shameful way. It is because, having reduced the masses to a point at which they have not the means of subsistence for a month, or even for a week in advance, the few only allow the many to work on condition of themselves receiving the lion's share. It is because these few prevent the remainder of men from producing the things they need and force them to produce not the necessaries of life for all, but whatever offers the greatest profits to the monopolists. In this is the substance of all socialism.
Snaps. Snaps, 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 snaps,
Snap, snap,
snaps.
snaps. It's the same.
It is the
Fucking,
same. It's like
Eras is the same. Eras is the same. Uh, take indeed a civilized country. It's a fake concept. The forests which once covered it have been cleared, the marshes drained, the climate improved. It has been made habitable. The soil, which bore formerly only a coarse vegetation, is covered today with rich harvests. The rock walls in the valleys are laid out in terraces and covered with vines bearing golden fruit. The wild plants which yielded naught but acrid berries or uneatable roots have been transformed by generations of culture into succulent vegetables, or trees covered with delicious fruits. Thousands of highways and railroads furrow the earth and pierce the mountains. The shriek of the engine is heard in the wild gorges of the Alps, the Caucasus, and the Himalayas. The rivers have been made navigable, the coasts carefully surveyed, are easy of access, artificial harbors, laboriously dug out and protected against the fury of the sea, afford shelter to the ships. Deep shafts have been sunk in the rocks, labyrinths of underground galleries have been dug out where coal may be raised or minerals extracted. At the crossings of the highways, great cities have sprung up, and within their borders all the treasures of industry, science, and art have been accumulated. I just want to say, they did not know about climate change, and you can tell.
I've been too busy making pies. Is that? Can you summarize?
uh, we have wrecked the world, made everything as efficient as humanly possible for everything, and that means we're ready.
Oh, I see. I see. It also kind of sounds, and correct me if I've like misinterpreted this because I'm making pies. It kind of sounds like this dude was pro-colonialism.
I don't know. I don't think we've gotten there yet, but maybe. We'll know.
Okay.
Who knows? Not everything in here is gonna be good.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we're doing like an analysis, and we're not just like reading it straight as it is.
I'm gonna keep reading it though.
Yeah, keep going.
Whole generations that lived and died in misery, oppressed and ill-treated by their masters, and worn out by toil, have handed on this immense inheritance to our century. For thousands of years, millions of men have labored to clear the forests, to drain the marshes, and to open up highways by land and water. Every rood of soil we cultivate in Europe has been watered by the sweat of several races of men. Every acre has its story of enforced labor, of intolerable toil, of the people's sufferings. Every mile of railway, every yard of tunnel has received its share of human blood. The shafts of the mines still bear on their rocky walls the marks made by the pick of the workmen who toiled to excavate them. The space between each prop in the underground galleries might be marked as a miner's grave, and who can tell what each of these graves has cost in tears, in privations, in unspeakable wretchedness to the family who depended on the scanty wage of the worker cut off in his prime by fire damp, rockfall, or flood. The cities, bound together by railroads and waterways, are organisms which have lived through centuries. Dig beneath them and you find, one above another, the foundations of streets, of houses, of theaters, of public buildings. Search into their history and you will see how the civilization of the town, its industry, its special characteristics have slowly grown and ripened through the cooperation of generations of its inhabitants before it could become what it is today. And even today, the value of each dwelling, factory, and warehouse, which has been created by the accumulated labor of the millions of workers now dead and buried, is only maintained by the very presence and labor of legions of the men who now inhabit that special corner of the globe. Each of the atoms composing what we call the wealth of nations owes its value to the fact that it is part of the great whole. What would a London dockyard or a great Paris warehouse be if they were not situated in these great centers of international commerce? What would become of our mines, our factories, our workshops, and our railways without the immense quantities of merchandise transported every day by sea and land? Millions of human beings have labored to create the civilization on which we pride ourselves today. Other millions, scattered through the globe, labor to maintain it. Without them, nothing would be left in 50 years but ruins. There's not even a thought or an invention, which is not common property, born of the past and the present. Thousands of inventors, known and unknown, who have died in poverty, have cooperated in the invention of each of these machines, which embody the genius of man. Thousands of writers, of poets, of scholars have labored to increase knowledge, to dissipate error, and to create that atmosphere of scientific thought without which the marvels of our century could never have appeared. And these thousands of philosophers, of poets, of scholars, of inventors, have themselves been supported by the labor of past centuries. They've been upheld and nourished through life, both physically and mentally, by legions of workers and craftsmen of all sorts. They've drawn their motive force from the environment. Interesting ways of thinking about the world, of both the world. To Kropotkin, it is a good thing that we did all the changes to this world,
but also he like acknowledges literal deaths it took to get there.
I mean, it's all blood.
Yeah.
Right?
In his own words, even.
Yeah, basically.
Huh.
Yeah.
Why is this dude okay with this? Like,
I mean,
does he? Yeah.
I don't know that he's okay with it. We're gonna get into it. I think it's like this is the start of the thing, and there may go. We'll see.
There's more. Just kidding. How long is this? Because I'm just doing like some quick averaging math, and we might need like 2 or 3 sessions of this in order to make about 6 million.
We will have enough. We will not get to the end of this before we are done pies.
Sick.
It's hundreds of pages.
Excellent. All right, we're gonna get like a decent amount of way into this because I'm making about 400,000 every 30 minutes. And if I keep doing that, I'm gonna be making less. So we're only gonna be making about 3 million per stream.
Is that not enough?
No, we need like 6 million for our revolution to be like successful and no one die.
It was
and
it was not 6 million, was it?
I think it was 6.5 million, and I'm pretty sure we need more because we're gonna make even more choices that put us into debt.
I definitely thought it was 600,000.
No way. No way. Let me check.
Yeah,
How do I check?
Take a quick check. We'll take a quick break. Quick check. In the chat.
How do I check?
Fenrir pointing out that there are actually articles from the 1800s about climate change. I didn't know that. That's really interesting. I'd love to read those.
Also, your follow-up of like, it was just like now. Yeah. Sigh.
Yeah, there weren't enough terrible effects of whatever. So many dudes were like, no, it's fine, which like even now. Also putting forth that Kropotkin may be like, well, we're here now because you can't change the past. I think that's possible. I think he's like acknowledging that both to him, you know, industry is good and has given us the means by which we can do a lot and care for one another, but also that the history of all of these inventions is tied up in class struggle, which is like his primary interest here.
Right. It's like the same argument that computers could help. Like the method in which we build computers is through colonialism. But we have computer infrastructure now.
Totally. Yeah. How's it looking on your end?
I couldn't figure out how much money we need.
Can you
if
not
we only
get
need
to
600?
Treasury?
I don't think we found the treasury last time. I genuinely don't know where it is. If you Google where it is, I will go to the treasury and I will figure this out for us. There's so many people who want to give me things. They're just standing there waiting to give me gifts because they love me. They're just watching me. You can just see them. I guess, I don't know. It's very small in the stream, but if you zoom in, you will see 2 ladies just off to the side, just staring at me. It's Slightly unnerving.
Okay, Bowerstone Castle. Having walked up having walked up the stairs and entered the castle itself, you find yourself in the main hall.
Mm-hmm.
I can
Yeah.
direct you. So are you in the main
Sure.
hall?
Yeah, okay, I'll go to the main hall.
You should go to the main
Next
hall.
time I fuck up. I still haven't. Oh no, I just fucked up. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the main hall now. Firestone Castle and fast travel. All right, we're gonna be there.
Okay.
Oh yeah, 6.5 million. There it is.
Is it?
Yeah, it is 6.5 million, and we're like 700,000 under it, so it's actually like 7 million.
Is it really? That's wild. Okay, I did not think it was that much.
Yeah, we've
Well,
got
that's fine. We got time.
we've got a while, folks. We are in it for the long Kropotkins.
Okay, well then, let's continue. Okay. The genius of a Seguin, a mayor, a grove, has certainly done more to launch industry in new directions than all the capitalists in the world. But men of genius are themselves the children of industry as well as of science. Not until thousands of steam engines have been working for years before all eyes, constantly transforming heat into dynamic force, and this force into sound, light, and electricity, could the insight of genius proclaim the mechanical origin and the unity of the physical forces. And if we, children of the 19th century, have at last grasped this idea, if we know now how to apply it, it is again because daily experience has prepared the way. The thinkers of the 18th century saw and declared it, but the idea remained undeveloped because the 18th century had not grown up like ours, side by side with the steam engine. Imagine the decades that might have passed while we remained in ignorance of this law, which has revolutionized modern industry, had Watt not found at Soho skilled workmen to embody his ideas in metal, bringing all the parts of his engine to perfection so that steam, pent in a complete mechanism, and rendered more docile than a horse, more manageable than water, became at last the very soul of modern industry. Could you turn? I'm just gonna turn down the sound of the game a
Oh
little
yeah,
bit.
go
'Cause it
for
is
it.
quite...
It's really quiet. Or actually, I think I've turned it down for the chat. If it is too loud still, let me know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Brianna, feel free to change,
Yeah,
even mute
will
if
do.
you want. You're welcome to let me toil over the pies.
I'm gonna mute and focus on my reading.
Yeah, they're really chatty, aren't they?
They are. Every machine has had the same history, a long record of sleepless nights and of poverty, of disillusions and of joys, of partial improvements discovered by several generations of nameless workers who have added to the original invention these little nothings, without which the most fertile idea would remain fruitless. More than that, every new invention is a synthesis, the resultant of innumerable inventions which have preceded it in the vast field of mechanics and industry. Science and industry, knowledge and application, discovery and practical realization leading to new discoveries, cunning of brain and of hand, toil of mind and muscle, all work together. Each discovery, each advance, each increase in the sum of human riches owes its being to the physical and mental travail of the past and the present. By what right, then, can anyone whatever appropriate the least morsel of this immense whole and say, "This is mine, not yours"? Federer in the chat says, "Oh hey, you could rip and edit the audio off of early 6.5 million gold and have a Brie audiobook of Kropotkin." That's very funny.
Yeah, this is gonna become the official audiobook.
Yeah, the official audiobook.
Even with all of our conversation, like this is included in the audiobook.
Definitely. To me, the vibe of what Kropotkin is saying is like, we have done all of this, and all of this is due to the workers.
Yes. So he's
yeah.
a union man. Through and
he's
through.
A union man. I mean, he's an anarcho-communist.
Yes.
Which
I guess
in this
union
era,
is simplifying. Yeah, and yeah.
All right. Do we have any more to say about this section, or shall I move on to section 3?
I admit I was failing at both listening and pie making.
You're in a difficult position, Claire.
I'm between a pie and a revolutionary.
I'm really excited for the people who watch this after to be like, all right, time to watch a Fable 3 playthrough, and then they get to this section.
Yeah, I think this is episode 5 or 6, and you just get through 5 normal episodes, and then you just get here, and it's fucking, we're
And
just
listen, you
reading.
could skip
Yeah,
it because you know it's
you
just going to
could
be
skip
pie
it.
making.
You know what is gonna, like, just look for the icon in the future. Everyone who's here now, you have to suffer with us or enjoy with us. This is why you're here. But everyone in the future who did not choose to be here tonight, you just skip this
You
part.
can just skip, but it's also fun.
It's also, this is the best part of the game. IMO. IMO. This is the best part of the video game, is reading revolutionary
to me,
text.
this is just the logical conclusion of the intro sequence of this game where the chicken is going through all of the industry, which is such a good intro for a game that is so like,
so bad.
It's so like mid about revolution, but that intro is like, yeah, burn it down.
Yeah,
all right, section 3.
Oh, fuck, I fucked up. I got too excited. All right, keep going.
It has come about, however, in the course of the ages traversed by the human race, that all that enables man to produce and to increase his power of production has been seized by the few. Sometime, perhaps, we will relate how this came to pass. For the present, let it suffice to state the fact and analyze its consequences. Today, the soil, which actually owes its value to the needs of an ever-increasing population, belongs to a minority who prevent the people from cultivating it, or do not allow them to cultivate it according to modern methods. The mines, though they represent the labor of several generations and derive their sole value from the requirements of the industry of a nation and the density of the population, the mines also belong to the few, and these few restrict the output of coal or prevent it entirely if they find more profitable investments for their capital. Machinery, too, has become the exclusive property of the few, and even when a machine incontestably represents the improvements added to the original rough invention by 3 or 4 generations of workers, it nonetheless belongs to a few owners. And if the descendants of the very inventor who constructed the first machine for lace making a century ago were to present themselves today in a lace factory at Bâle or Nottingham and demand their rights, they would be told, hands off, this machine is not yours, and they would be shot down if they attempted to take possession of it. The railways, which would be useless as so much old iron without the teeming population of Europe, its industry, its commerce, and its marts, belong to a few shareholders, ignorant perhaps of the whereabouts of the lines of rails which yield them revenues greater than those of medieval kings. And if the children of those who perished by thousands when excavating the railway cuttings and tunnels were to assemble one day, crowding in their rags and hunger, to demand bread from their shareholders, they would be met with bayonets and grape shot, to disperse them and safeguard, quote, vested interests. In virtue of this monstrous system, the son of the worker, on entering life, finds no field which he may till, no machine which he may tend, no mine in which he may dig, without accepting to leave a great part of what he will produce to a master. He must sell his labor for a scant and uncertain wage. His father and his grandfather have toiled to drain this field, to build this mill, to perfect this machine. They gave to the work the full measure of their strength, and what more could they give? But their heir comes into the world poorer than the lowest. I'm not reading that word. It was a slur. If he obtains leave to till the fields, it is on condition of surrendering a quarter of the produce to his master, and another quarter to the government and the middleman. And this tax levied upon him by the state, the capitalist, the lord of the manor, and the middleman, is always increasing. It rarely leaves him the power to improve his system of culture. If he turns to industry, he is allowed to work, though not always even that, only on condition that he yields half or 2/3 of the product to him whom the land recognizes as the owner of the machine. We cry shame on the feudal baron who forbade the present to turn a clod of earth unless he surrendered to his lord a fourth of his crop. We call those the barbarous times. But if the forms have changed, the relations have remained the same, and the worker is forced, under the name of free contract, to accept feudal obligations. For, turn where he will, he can find no better conditions. Everything has become private property, and he must accept or die of hunger. The result of this state of things is that all our productions tends in the wrong direction. Enterprise takes no thought for the needs of the community. Its only aim is to increase the gains of the speculator. Hence the constant fluctuations of trade, the periodical industrial crises, each of which throws score of thousands of workers on the streets. The working people cannot purchase with their wages the wealth which they have produced, and industry seeks foreign markets among the moneyed classes of other nations. In the East, in Africa, everywhere, in Egypt, Tonkin, or the Congo, the European is thus bound to promote the growth of serfdom, and so he does. But soon he finds everywhere similar competitors. All the nations evolve in the same lines, and wars, perpetual wars, break out for the right of precedence in the market. Wars for the possession of the East, wars for the empire of the sea, wars to impose duties on imports and to dictate conditions to neighboring states, wars against those blacks who revolt. The roar of the cannon never ceases in the world. Whole races are massacred. The state of Europe spends a third of their budgets in armaments, and we know how heavily these taxes fall on the workers. Education still remains the privilege of a small minority, for it is idle to talk of education when the workman's child is forced, at the age of 13, to go down into the mine or to help his father on the farm. It is idle to talk of studies to the worker, who comes home in the evening crushed by excessive toil with its brutalizing atmosphere. Society is thus bound to remain divided into two hostile camps, and in such conditions, freedom is a vain word. The radical begins by demanding a greater extension of political rights, but he soon sees that the breath of liberty leads to the uplifting of the proletariat, and then he turns round, changes his opinions, and reverts to oppressive legislation and government by the sword. A vast array of courts, judges, executioners, policemen, and gaolers is needed to uphold these privileges, and this array gives rise in its turn to a whole system of espionage, of false witness, of spies, of threats, and corruption. The system under which we live checks in its turn the growth of the social sentiment. We all know that without uprightness, without self-respect, without sympathy and mutual aid, humankind must perish, as perish the few races of animals living by rapine or the slave-keeping ants. But such ideas are not to the taste of the ruling classes, and they have elaborated a whole system of pseudoscience to teach the contrary. Fine sermons have been preached on the text that those who have should share with those who have not. But he who would act out this principle is speedily informed that these beautiful sentiments are all very well in poetry, but not in practice. To lie is to degrade and besmirch oneself, we say, and yet all civilized life becomes one huge lie. We accustom ourselves and our children to hypocrisy, to the practice of a double-faced morality, and since the brain is ill at ease among lies, we cheat ourselves with sophistry. Hypocrisy and sophistry become the second nature of the civilized man. But a society cannot live thus. It must return to truth or cease to exist. Thus, the consequences which spring from the original act of monopoly spread through the whole of social life. Under pain of death, human societies are forced to return to first principles. The means of production being the collective work of humanity, the product should be the collective property of all races. Individual appropriation is neither just nor serviceable. All belongs to all. All things are for men, since all men have need of them, since all men have worked in the measure of their strength to produce them, and since it is not possible to evaluate everyone's part in the production of the world's wealth. All things are for all. Here is an immense stock of tools and implements. Here are all those iron slaves which we call machines, which saw and plane, spin and weave for us, unmaking and remaking, working up raw matter to produce the marvels of our time. But nobody has the right to seize a single one of these machines and say, "This is mine. If you want to use it, you must pay me a tax on each of your products." Any more than the feudal lord of medieval times had the right to say to the peasant, "This hill, this meadow belong to me, and you must pay me a tax on every sheaf of corn you reap, on every rick you build." All is for all. If the man and the woman bear their fair share of work, they have the right to their fair share of all that is produced by all, and that share is enough to secure them well-being. No more of such vague formulas as the right to work or to eat the whole result of his labor. What we proclaim is the right to well-being. Well-being for all.
Fuck yeah. Also,
Fuck yeah.
are you
Fuck it
out
up.
of the Google Meet? Your captions aren't coming through.
They should be. I'm still in it. Oh, did I get
Hmm.
muted? Oh, I got muted somehow. Interesting.
Welcome back to the captions. I just want to say go off.
Go
Also,
off.
like, I also the whole idea of like the mines belong to the people made me think like, you know what? Like if the people collectively owned the mines, and I know that like clearly he didn't realize about climate change, even if there were articles back then. Like we still have mines today. Like we still have
Yeah.
coal and whatnot. Like that shit would have been shut down if the
Right.
mines belonged to the people.
I mean, the truth is, we still have mines, and now a lot of them are in, colonized countries that, and instead of mining coal, they mine lithium
Right.
for
Yes.
phones. Like,
I mean, we do
you
both.
know,
We do coal
sorry?
and lithium. Like we have coal
Yeah.
mines still, and we have lithium like
Yeah.
mines too now.
Yeah.
We've just added more mines.
We've just added more mines. Yeah, the shit whips.
You might be onto
Um,
something. You know what? I might be with you.
Starting to think he might have a point or two.
Like
Maybe we should try this.
maybe we should give it a shot.
Just
Maybe
give it a shot.
you know?
Yeah. Okay. Our call does end soon, and
Yeah,
we are about to start chapter 2.
I think the next time I fuck up, we can pause, but I do have my times 10 gold multiplier, and I'm
yeah.
at 1,000,000 gold right now. And I promise you I will fuck up in the next like 60 to like 100 seconds. So unless I'm like now I'm gonna like win out of spite. But if I keep talking, I'm probably gonna
No, it's
fuck
all
up.
good. I'll talk. You do your thing, and we'll be fine.
Well, no, see, if you talk, then I'm gonna not fuck up because I'm gonna be like,
It's okay.
excellent.
Don't fuck up. It's fine. Make the money in the video game.
All right.
The thing that is fascinating to me about this so far is like, it's the same arguments. It's the same.
It is. Yeah, it's literally the same.
And the same counter arguments. It is capitalist counter argumentation is the same. They always say the same things. They have always said the same things. It works in poetry, but not in practice. Like, they still just say that, you know? Man.
But also like it's so interesting to think about like what will change in 100 years from now in terms of like we would shut down the coal mines. I'm assuming we would shut down the lithium mines, and that would be a complex thing because I mean we would probably just like recycle technology way better if
and
like,
also would we shut down the mines, or would we make there you go, or would we make mines that, or would we find different ways to gather materials in ways that are equitable? And this is the other part of this, right? Like, obviously what is here is talking about labor and that aspect of things. It's not talking about, it is talking about colonialism. He mentions colonialism.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter in the contemporary day, at the very least, is to know how to do these things ethically, you must listen to those who have been on this land.
Yeah.
That's like the other factor here is like, you got to read this and then read Rest of the Earth, like you got to take them together. Or other texts that are, about colonialism or about, indigenous sovereignty and stuff like that.
Well, so far I'm liking what I'm hearing, and I'm excited to get to well-being for all, but I think it's time for a break.
Time for a little break. We'll come back with well-being for all.
All right, see y'all in a sec.
See you in a sec. All right, here we go.
Here we are. Hi, everybody.
I also was curious a little bit about when exactly this was written. And the exact year is 1892. So this is pre-Russian Revolution.
1892. Wow.
Yeah, this is pre-Soviet Union. So, shoutouts. To be clear, I don't know that the sort of society that Kropotkin envisioned is exactly what happened in the Soviet Union.
No.
Yeah, I think they should have maybe read a little bit.
I think maybe they should have read some Kropotkin. Yeah.
I'm sure they didn't read any.
I mean, maybe they did, and then they just like
I'm sure that
used
they read
it.
Kropotkin. They just
Like it's the
didn't,
way that like the modern government uses Malcolm X quotes.
Sure.
I don't know.
I don't know that it's 100%.
It's not
the same thing.
100% that, but it's like the use
There's-
of revolutionary
right.
politics to promote like
They almost did.
the current power
I'm
structures.
I'm sure that they read this and made their own particular conclusions, because it is possible to read something and think that you
And
agree
be
with
wrong.
it and be wrong.
And be wrong and create just another version of harmful power structures.
Yeah.
Wow, I really formed that sentence with a ×9 multiplier.
Fenrir says, like, wouldn't this be a text that came out alongside the communist text preceding and through the revolution? Yeah, probably. I'm sure that it's one of them. I'm sure that, yeah, there were a lot of these types of things. I mean, it was, in general, very, there was a lot of communist thought before the revolution.
Interesting
Okay.
how that is, huh? A lot of communist thought right before revolutions. Strange how that works.
Strange. But media does not matter, as we know.
No.
Theory does not matter. These things do not matter. Not that everyone has to read theory, but
Yes, yeah.
Writing does not matter, as we know. Chapter 2, Well-being for all. Well-being for all is not a dream. It is possible, realizable, owing to all that our ancestors have done to increase our powers of production. We know indeed that the producers, although they constitute hardly 1/3 of the inhabitants of civilized countries, even now produce such quantities of goods that a certain degree of comfort could be brought to every hearth. We know further that if all those who squander today the fruits of others' toil were forced to employ their leisure in useful work, our wealth would increase in proportion to the number of producers and more. Finally, we know that contrary to the theory enunciated by Malthus, that oracle of middle-class economics, the productive powers of the human race increase at a much more rapid ratio than its powers of reproduction. The more thickly men are crowded on the soil, the more rapid is the growth of their wealth-creating power. Thus, although the powers of England have only increased from 1844 to 1890 by 62%, its production has grown, to say the least at double that rate, to wit by 130%. In France, where the population has grown more slowly, the increase in production is nevertheless very rapid. Notwithstanding the crises through which agriculture is frequently passing, notwithstanding state interference, the blood tax, conscription, and speculative commerce and finance, the production of wheat in France has increased fourfold, and industrial production more than tenfold in the course of the last 80 years. In the United States, the progress is still more striking. In spite of immigration, or rather precisely because of the influx of surplus European labor, the United States have multiplied their wealth tenfold. However, these figures give yet a very faint idea of what our wealth might become under better conditions. For alongside of the rapid development of our wealth-producing powers, we have an overwhelming increase in the ranks of the idlers and middlemen. Instead of capital gradually concentrating itself in a few hands so that it would only be necessary for the community to dispossess a few millionaires and enter upon its lawful heritage, instead of this socialist forecast proving true, the exact reverse is coming to pass. The swarm of parasites is ever increasing. Sick parasite reference, dude. In France, there are not 10 actual producers to every 30 inhabitants.
Fuck you.
The whole agricultural wealth of the country is the work of less than 7 millions of men. And in the two great industries, mining and the textile trade, you will find that the workers number less than 2 and 1.5 millions. But the exploiters of labor, how many are they? In England, exclusive of Scotland and Ireland, only 1 million workers, men, women, and children, are employed in all the textile trades. Rather more than 500,000 work the mines, rather less than 500,000 till the ground, and the statisticians have to exaggerate all the figures in order to establish a maximum of 8 million producers to 26 million inhabitants. Strictly speaking, The creators of the goods exported from Britain to all the ends of the earth comprise only from 6 to 7 million workers. And what is the sum of the shareholders and middlemen who levy the first fruits of labor from far and near, and heap up unearned gains by thrusting themselves between the producer and the consumer, paying the former not a fifth, nay, not a 20th of the price they exact from the latter? Nor is this all. Those who withhold capital constantly reduce the output by restraining production. We need not speak of the cartloads of oysters thrown into the sea to prevent a dainty, hitherto reserved for the rich, from becoming a food for the people. We need not speak of the 1,001 luxuries, stuffs, foods, etc., treated after the same fashion as the oysters. It is enough to remember the way in which the production of the most necessary things is limited. Legions of miners are ready and willing to dig out coal every day and send it to those who are shivering with cold. But too often a third or even 2/3 of their number are forbidden to work more than 3 days a week because, forsooth, the price of coal must be kept up. Thousands of weavers are forbidden to work the looms, though their wives and children go in rags, and though 3/4 of the population of Europe have no clothing worthy the name. Hundreds of blast furnaces, thousands of factories periodically stand idle. Others only work half time, and in every civilized nation there is a permanent population of about 2 million individuals who ask only for work, but to whom work is denied. How gladly would these millions of men set to work to reclaim waste lands or to transform ill-cultivated land into fertile fields, rich in harvests. A year of well-directed toil would suffice to multiply fivefold the produce of dry lands in the south of France, which now yield only about 8 bushels of wheat per acre. But these men, who would be happy to become hardy pioneers in so many branches of wealth-producing activity, must stay their hands because the owners of the soil, the mines, and the factories prefer to invest their capital, stolen in the first place from the community, in Turkish or Egyptian bonds, or in Patagonian gold mines, and so make Egyptian fellas, Italian exiles, and Chinese, I don't think that's a word I should say, their wage slaves. So much for the direct and deliberate limitation of production. But there is also a limitation, indirect and not of said purpose, which consists in spending human toil on objects absolutely useless or destined only to satisfy the dull vanity of the rich. It is impossible to reckon in figures the extent to which wealth is restricted indirectly, the extent to which energy is squandered that might have served to produce, and above all, to prepare the machinery necessary to production. It is enough to cite the immense sums spent by Europe in armaments for the sole purpose of acquiring control of the markets, and so forcing her own commercial standards on neighboring territories and making exploitation easier at home. The millions paid every year to officials of all sorts, whose function is to maintain the rights of minorities, the right, that is, of a few rich men, to manipulate the economic activities of the nation. The millions spent on judges, prisons, policemen, and all the paraphernalia of so-called justice, spent to no purpose because we know that every alleviation, however slight, of the wretchedness of our great cities is followed by the very considerable diminution of crime. Lastly, the millions spent on propagating pernicious doctrines by means of the press and news cooked in the interest of this or that party, of this politician, or of that company of exploiters.
It's the same fucking arguments. It's the
It's the
same.
same
They're doing
argument.
the same thing. Throwing food out. The like, what was it? Mussels
Uh-huh.
or oysters or something?
Oysters.
Oysters. Just, it's the same thing. This is
Uh-huh.
130 years later?
Yeah. Yeah. 130 years later, it's the same thing.
When are we burning it down? And
I
by it,
think
I mean
it's
very small amounts of like things, because clearly the land can
uh-huh.
be nurtured.
Uh-huh. The thing that's wild, I like that. I thank you to Kropotkin in the past for clarifying that minorities has a very different meaning in the past than it has now. So thanks just
Huh.
for clarifying that in this context, minorities means few rich, the 1% basically, rather than our current understanding
Wait,
of minorities.
no. They want you to think that they're the minorities. I mean, they've literally made what was the thing? There was this quote where like a millionaire went on and was like, I don't like the word wealthy. I like the word like something about like affluently there was some bullshit. Anyways,
Sure, something like that.
they
Yeah.
were like,
I
it's a
mean,
slur against millionaires. We are minorities.
uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah. Whereas Kropotkin means minorities as in
As in, we can take them.
yeah. um yeah, uh-huh. All right, I'm
All
going to
right.
continue.
Yes.
But over and above this, we must take into account all the labor that goes to sheer waste in keeping up the stables, the kennels, and the retinue of the rich, for instance, in pandering to the caprices of society and to the depraved tastes of the fashionable mob, in forcing the consumer on the one hand to buy what he does not need, or foisting an inferior article upon him by means of puffery, and in producing on the other hand wares which are absolutely injurious but profitable to the manufacturer. What is squandered in this manner would be enough to double our real wealth, or so to plenish our mills and factories with machinery that they would soon flood the shops with all that is now lacking to 2/3 of the nation. Under our present system, a full quarter of the producers in every nation are forced to be idle for 3 or 4 months in the year, and the labor of another quarter, if not the half, has no better results than the amusement of the rich or the exploitation of the public. Thus, if we consider on the one hand the rapidity with which civilized nations augment their powers of production, and on the other hand the limits set to that production, be it directly or indirectly by existing conditions, one cannot but conclude that an economic system a trifle more enlightened would permit them to heap up in a few years so many useful products that they would be constrained to cry, "Enough! We have enough coal and bread and raiment. Let us rest and consider how best to use our powers, how best to employ our leisure." No, plenty for all is not a dream, though it was a dream indeed in those old days when man, for all his pains, could hardly win a bushel of wheat from an acre of land, and had to fashion by hand all the implements he used in agriculture and industry. Now it is no longer a dream, because man has invented a motor which, with a little iron and a few pounds of coal, gives him the mastery of a creature strong and docile as a horse, and capable of setting the most complicated machinery in motion. But if plenty for all is to become a reality, this immense capital, cities, houses, pastures, arable lands, factories, highways, education must cease to be regarded as private property for the monopolist to dispose of at his pleasure. This rich endowment, painfully won, builded, fashioned, or invented by our ancestors, must become common property, so that the collective interests of men may gain from it the greatest good for all. There must be expropriation, the well-being of all, the end, expropriation, the means. That's section 1. Uh, it's the same. I know we say it's the same a lot.
Like, it's so good. It's like it's validating and it's frustrating at the same time. That it's like
Yeah.
we have been saying the same thing for
And like
130 fucking years and longer, probably.
and let's be clear that like we can't do things the way that we always did them in like this luxurious way.
Mhm.
Or not like luxurious. We can still have luxury, and in fact we should. But like we can't necessarily keep running
Right.
trains off of coal. But here's
Yeah.
the thing. We don't run trains off of coal anymore.
Uh-huh.
Like I guess sort of through electricity, but like the point is there are methods that exist that will not only allow for plenty for all, but would also allow for a more ethical, safe, healthy production of things for the land, for people, limiting pollution, those sorts of things. They exist. We have the technology.
And if the technology changed, we already talked about this, like, and we figured out, like, hey, the way we're doing things now isn't working. If it wasn't owned by a monopoly, then it would likely change faster. Like,
Yes.
as soon as the consciousness of the public was like, oh shit, this is a problem. Most of the time, people are like, this is a problem. We should solve this. This is what we fucking do.
Yes, exactly. And like, yeah, the thing is, but just in terms of the idea of the means already exist. They
Mhm.
just have to be, you know.
I want to say, like, eventually, like, this argument of like the land is plentiful, like we're seeing that like land is becoming arid due to like
Yeah.
some farming techniques, but we've like learned how to like negate that, I think, more recently. Or maybe that's
And
not true.
also, there are ways, yeah, there are ways to negate it, and also we don't necessarily need as much food production as we have.
Hmm.
Um, like again, we can still have plenty and luxury without that level of production.
Right. It's like
Um,
how we only use the most perfect looking vegetables, and it's like if the vegetable doesn't look right, it gets thrown in like either in the trash or in like something to become a sauce because we have like a standard on how a vegetable should look in order to be sold to a customer. Like that's bullshit.
and also, like as Fenrir
Yeah,
points
and
out, also
damming.
lands becoming
Yeah.
arid due to damming, right? Exactly. Um, and also like not even just like food that doesn't look right, food that is thrown out for purposes of
Right.
capitalism.
And then there's that. That's like the other side.
Right.
Like that's you get food wasted before it ever gets to like anything, before it like even gets to like any facility. And then you get food wasted at the very end of this whole process,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is even more infuriating because then we've used resources to move it.
Yeah. And the same skills that allow us to have these things can be used in a better way.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Like
Like,
what if instead of taking all of the food to a single location, we constructed systems like, I don't know, a map that plots things and takes
mhm,
food to people?
yeah. Uh-huh. And also,
Uh-huh.
like, I think a lot. Mhm.
Sorry, keep going.
I think a lot about, and I'm sure we'll get into this, and I suspect that maybe Kropotkin may have the particular view of like, what some jobs are um like imperfect, like some jobs are unnecessary that
Hmm.
can
He's already said
be
that,
done.
hasn't he?
He said that people want to work and they're
Right.
not able to. And like my a thing that I think is interesting is not only is the technology stuff that we can change and basically use to make our lives better overall, which is true. The other part of it is there are a lot of skills can be reused, right? We don't necessarily have to reteach everyone everything. Um, like I think about like insurance agents. And we don't
Mm.
need insurance agents after the revolution. But you know what we would need? People to coordinate uh construction workers to rebuild a house after it's burned down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um so it's not any technology here that can be expropriate,
Mm-hmm.
expropriation, but as well skill and knowledge. We have
Yeah.
what we need.
Skills are transferable.
Skills are transferable. Yeah. Um. Yeah, as Snyder points out, what if we did electric trains instead of all the semi-burning fuel, and that electricity ran on the newest, safest forms of electricity? In regards to reteaching everyone, it's like welder on an oil rig could weld literally anything beneficial. Yep, absolutely. Section
Yeah.
2 of chapter. How goes pie making? Tell me how pie making's going.
We're at 1,300,000 right now. So
Wow.
we're doing good. We're doing good. We're like, I mean, what is this? 16% of the way there, but like not really because we need 7 million. I think I did the math right. I think we're about 16%
Yeah, we're doing all right. We're
of the
getting
way
there.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what we happen to need to get out of just like out of debt?
We have enough to get out of debt. If we wanted
Cool.
to keep playing, we could get out of debt, and keep going.
Maybe next week we do like a playing session. We'll see.
Cool.
Figure it out. But for now, section 2 of chapter 2. Um Expropriation. Such then is the problem with which history has put before the men of the 20th century. The return to communism in all that ministers to the well-being of man. But this problem cannot be solved by means of legislation. No one imagines that. The poor, no less than the rich, understand that neither the existing governments, nor any which might arise out of possible political changes, would be capable of finding a solution.
Snaps.
We feel the necessity of a social revolution. Rich and poor alike recognize that this revolution is imminent, that it may break out in a very few years. A great change in thought has been accomplished during the last half of the 19th century, but suppressed as it was by propertied classes. By the okay, let me try that sentence again.
Another take.
A great change in thought has been accomplished during the last half of the 19th century, but suppressed as it was by the property classes and denied its natural development, this new spirit must break now its bonds by violence and realize itself in a revolution. Whence comes the revolution, and how will it announce its coming? None can answer these questions. The future is hidden. But those who watch and think do not misinterpret the signs. Workers and exploiters, revolutionists and conservatives, thinkers and men of action all feel that the revolution is at our doors. Well, what are we to do when the thunderbolt has fallen? Great question, Kropotkin. We have all been studying the dramatic side of revolution so much, and the practical work of revolution so little, that we are apt to see only the stage effects, so to speak, of these great movements. The fight of the first days, the barricades. But this fight, this first skirmish, is soon ended, and it is only after the overthrow of the old constitution that the real work of revolution can be said to begin. Effete and powerless, attacked on all sides, the old rulers are soon swept away by the breath of insurrection. In a few days, the middle-class monarchy of 1848 was no more, and while Louis Philippe was making good his escape in a cab, Paris had already forgotten her citizen king. The government of Thiers disappeared on the 18th of March, 1871, in a few hours, leaving Paris mistress of her destinies. Yet 1848 and 1871 were only insurrections. Before a popular revolution, the masters of the old order disappear with a surprising rapidity. Its upholders fly the country to plot in safety elsewhere and to devise measures for their return. The former government having disappeared, the army, hesitating before the tide of popular opinion, no longer obeys its commanders, who have also prudently decamped. The troops stand by without interfering or join the rebels. The police, standing at ease, are uncertain whether to belabor the crowd or to cry, long live the commune, while some retire to their quarters to await the pleasure of the new government. They should all retire. Wealthy citizens pack their trunks and betake themselves to places of safety. The people remain. This is how a revolution is ushered in. In several large towns, the commune is proclaimed. In the streets wander thousands of men who in the evening crowd into improvised clubs asking, "What shall we do?" and ardently discuss public affairs in which all take an interest. Those who yesterday were most indifferent are perhaps the most zealous. Everywhere there is plenty of goodwill and a keen desire to make victory certain. It is a time of supreme devotion. The people are ready to go forward. All this is splendid, sublime, but still it is not a revolution. Nay, it is only now that the work of the revolutionist begins. I'm going to pause here and just say, this is all great. The use of the thousands of men who in the evening crowd into improvised clubs makes me imagine in a just random fucking club are just like in a nightclub are just like talking about, hey, what do we do with the revolution? Boom, 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 boom.
Okay, but like clubs are a post-revolutionary job, right? Social
Absolutely.
gatherings. Like I like to start thinking about like the work of like, is this a post revolutionary job? Will this exist after? And I think it's interesting, like, will video games exist after the revolution?
They'll be different.
They will be different.
They'll be different.
Also, I know this is real life, and so dramatic irony doesn't exist, but the fact that this was written how many years before the Russian Revolution, and then that didn't go super good in favor of like what maybe
Yeah.
Kropotkins would have liked, just makes me think, hey, um, always know what your revolutionary like outcome might be,
Uh-huh.
and don't follow populists.
Or, don't follow authoritarians.
Right? Yes, it can be a authoritarian populace.
That's true. Populism, yeah, you're right.
Was
You're right.
was it that not like I feel like at the like as revolutions occur, the people who like gain authority are the people who like center themselves in the like networks. If they're not like already using a police
That would
force
not
to
be
gain power.
populists in that case. You're not describing populism
Hmm.
necessarily.
Say more.
To my understanding, and again, it's a limited understanding, populism is about a conceptual, theoretical appeal to the major populace, like the
Oh, I see.
the people, without necessarily having their best interests in mind.
Right.
It's like
Yes.
it's the idea of like it's all common sense. It's all just common sense.
Right. Yeah.
That is my understanding of populism. It
Using
is a
the
limited
idea of
understanding.
common sense to gain power.
Yes, stuff like that. Also in the chat, people pointing out that what I'm describing about nightclubs is Disco Elysium, according to Nat. And Fenrir saying video games will exist because games exist. And that, not gonna lie, talking on the curb outside of all ages punk shows was extremely chatting about revolution in my experience. Yeah, that seems right. That seems absolutely right. And yeah, video games will exist because games exist. And also,
Mhm.
I'm fascinated about how media is going to exist after the revolution,
God,
and
yeah.
like, hey, what happens to copyright?
We won't need it, right? Because money is no longer a
Is
thing.
right, is money the only reason that copyright exists? What about credit? The
Don't you
current
don't you have an
structure
essay
of
on this? Haven't you
I did.
written a thesis on this?
I did. And the answer that I came to is, boy, it's going to be fucking complicated.
Yeah.
Because, if you're crediting, the truth is about authorship is like, if without money, like,
Ideas do not live in an individual.
the ideas do not live in an individual,
They
right?
live in
Is the
community.
tree a co-author?
Yeah.
If you sat under the tree while you wrote, right?
Right.
And the answer to that is like, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. As Nat says, artists deserve to control their own works. What if literally anyone could continue a book series and claim its validity? I'm with you. And also, sometimes artists
But
fuck
also
up
people
really
do
bad.
that already. That's already a thing that
Yeah.
like with the Dune series. Like
Yeah.
the original author died and then his son
Yeah.
like picked it up and kept writing them.
I know, and that's bad, Nat says. Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah. But then
It's
like as
yeah.
far as I understand, most people are like, yeah, but is that really Dune? And then it divides people, right? But it's like people will follow naturally what is entertaining to them. And so would it be bad to offshoot? Like then you just have people who are like, I like this one more. And that's
Yes,
canon to them.
you're right, but also consider someone who like takes your, because there's still going to be conflict after the revolution. Imagine
Right.
someone who takes your like series about trans empowerment and like writes a book in the series that's like
Hmm.
super transphobic and is
That's
like,
true.
this is canon now.
Would that not then like from like a presumably like we're in like our ideal post-revolutionary world, the majority in this world understand that that sucks. um
Not necessarily, not inherently.
we're not, yeah, I mean you're right, like I feel like how do you deal with that? You find this person, you track them down, and you go, yo, please don't. I don't know
Potentially.
beyond that. You
Yeah.
offer them
Uh-huh.
education. You be like, hey,
Are
can
you
we like
saying,
talk about
I
this?
think you're coming to the conclusion that it's
Uh huh.
complicated.
I think I'm coming to the conclusion of restorative justice, but
Mm.
like without.
Right. And as Nat says, what if they say, actually, I think I will?
Yeah, that's a conflict.
And to be clear, as Fenrir is saying, I believe people used to do that prior to copyright, and people would be like, "Oh, this is fake author's name. Actually, I like they're writing more," and then go read that series instead. But like that's fanfic. And you're right. That
It's
is
fanfic.
kind of what happened. It's really complicated what happened pre-copyright. There's not like a specific thing that happened. It was a really complicated sort of structure, and there was in fact a lot of fakeness. But this is like my
Okay, you're
point
right.
is
It is complicated. I just like it more. This is what I've arrived at.
fair. Fair. Um yeah, it's complicated. And I wrote about this.
You did write a
And
thesis about it.
yeah, so
It's a very good
I'm
thesis.
thank you. Yeah, it's complicated. Um but also it has to be based in material conditions.
Hmm.
Um
Of like the
and
world
like
around us.
and also of our own mental health and necessities.
Hmm.
It is not, copyright exists for uh copyright exists for monetary reasons for sure, but credit also exists because people were getting really upset that other people started claiming credit for their work.
Hmm.
um Not that it's always been good, to be clear, but it is upsetting for someone to be like, actually I did this.
That is true. And also, like, where does the minds belong to the people, but the stories belong to like an individual who tells them in a certain
because the
way.
because they're not, minds and stories are not necessarily the same thing.
I know they're not the same thing. I'm just like, I'm curious. I I do not have the brain capacity right now to like find where that distinction lives.
It is a
You know what I
complicated
mean?
distinction. I mean, I know where it lives in our world, which is material
Right.
conditions.
Right.
Who gets
Yes.
paid for their thoughts, and that's why, like, the conclusion I come to about should you credit the tree that you
Hmm.
wrote under is no, because the tree doesn't benefit from your money. The tree doesn't need
Mm.
money. People need that in contemporary society.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yes,
Like I
and
said, very
mhm.
good thesis. Sorry, what did Nat say?
Oh no, Fenrir and Nat talking.
Oh, uh-huh.
Fenrir, and also like all slash most systems, like just like how Kropotkin says, copyright is taken to extreme by the people who have the most money,
Right.
i.e., Disney obsessively extending and loopholing copyright to hold their mouse. Yes,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
And Nat says the difference between the ownership of art and the ownership of resources is based entirely on pathos, IMO.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can't come up with logos. Um, yeah, totally. It's complicated. It's extremely complicated. But these are good. These are interesting discussions for sure.
IMO pathos is an important argument, sometimes more important than logos. Thank you, Nat.
Totally. All right, I'm going to continue. So the last thing we said is still it is not a revolution, nay, it is only now that the work of the revolutionist begins. Doubtless, the thirst for vengeance will be satisfied. The Watrins and the Thomases will pay the penalty of their unpopularity, but that is only an incident of the struggle and not a revolution. Socialist politicians, radicals, neglected geniuses of journalism, stump orators, middle class citizens, and workmen hurry to the town hall, to the government offices, and take possession of the vacant seats. Some rejoice their hearts with galloon, admire themselves in ministerial mirrors, and study to give orders with an air of importance appropriate to their new position. They must have a red sash, an embroidered cap, and magisterial gestures to impress their comrades of the office or the workshop. Others bury themselves in official papers, trying, with the best of wills, to make head or tail of them. They indict laws and issue high-flown worded decrees that nobody takes the trouble to carry out. Because the revolution has come. To give themselves an authority which is lacking, they seek the sanction of old forms of government. They take the names of provisional government, committee of public safety, mayor, governor of the town hall, commission of public weal, and whatnot. Elected or acclaimed, they assemble in boards or in communal councils. These bodies include men of 10 or 20 different schools, which, if not exactly private chapels, are at least so many sects which represent as many ways of regarding the scope, the bearing, and the goal of the revolution. Possibilists, collectivists, radicals, Jacobins, Blanquists are thrust together and waste time in wordy warfare. Honest men come into contact with ambitious ones whose only dream is power and who spurn the crowd whence they sprung. Coming together with diametrically opposed views, they are forced to form arbitrary alliances in order to create majorities that can but last a day. Wrangling, calling each other reactionaries, authoritarians, and rascals, incapable of coming to an understanding on any serious measure, dragged into discussions about trifles, producing nothing better than bombastic proclamations, yet taking themselves seriously,
I'm dying.
unwitting that
fucked
the
up
real
the
strength
pie.
of the movement is in the streets. All
Leftists.
All this may please those who like the theater, but it is not revolution. Nothing yet has been accomplished. Meanwhile, the people suffer. The factories are idle, the workshops closed, industry is at a standstill. The worker does not even earn the meager wage which was his before. Food goes up in price. With that heroic devotion which has always characterized them and which in great crises reaches the sublime, the people wait patiently. We place these 3 months of want at the service of the Republic, they said in 1848. Well, their quote unquote their representatives and the gentlemen of the new government, down to the meanest jack in office, received their salary regularly. The people suffer. With the childlike faith, with the good humor of the masses who believe in their leaders, they think that yonder, in the House, in the Town Hall, in the Committee of Public Safety, their welfare is being considered. But yonder, they are discussing everything under the sun except the welfare of the people. In 1793, while famine ravaged France and crippled the revolution, whilst the people were reduced to the depths of misery, whilst the Champs-Élysées were lined with luxurious carriages where women displayed their jewels and splendor, Robespierre was urging the Jacobins to discuss his treatise on the English Constitution. While the worker was suffering in 1848 from the general stoppage of trade, the provisional government and the House were wrangling over military pensions and prison labor, without troubling how the people were to live during this crisis. And could one cast a reproach at the Paris Commune, which was born beneath the Prussian cannon, and lasted only 70 days, it would be for this same error, this failure to understand that the revolution could not triumph unless those who fought on its side were fed, that on 15 pence a day a man cannot fight on the ramparts and at the same time support a family. The people suffer and say, how to find a way out of these difficulties.
Damn.
Leftist is the same.
I died. I was like, fuck. Anyways, I think rascals is a better word than comrade. I think we should all start calling each other rascals.
Yes. Absolutely.
Thank you, Fen. This is the new revolution. The Rascal Revolution. It sounds good too.
It sounds good. Rascal Revolution sounds kind of like a band though.
Yeah. That's what you say when like someone like questions you. It's just a band. It's just a band.
It's just a band. It's just a band. It's just a really popular band.
It's a really cool band. Everyone knows about it. Everyone's talking about it.
All the people know about it.
All of the people know about the Rascal Revolution. It'll come into your home too. Just wait and see.
Yeah. It's so unnerving that this is like 20 years before the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. It's like so like yeah. Kropotkin, you're not gonna like what happens. Fenrir says, Rascal Revolution, it's just a band a la Friends of Dorothy. And Nat, we have not read this before.
Have not.
I am bad at reading theory. And most of the theory that I've read and most of the contemporary theory theory that I've read has been about colonialism and anti-blackness and racism more than class relations specifically. So I have not read this before.
I would say you're doing a very good sight read.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a skill. Conquest of Bread, it seems fantastic so far. All right. Section 3. It seems to us that there is only one answer to this question. We must recognize and loudly proclaim that everyone, whatever his grade in the old society, whether strong or weak, capable or incapable, has before everything the right to live, and that society is bound to share amongst all, without exception, the means of existence at its disposal. We must acknowledge this and proclaim it aloud and act up to it. It must be so contrived that from the first day of the revolution, the worker shall know that a new era is opening before him, that henceforward none need crouch under the bridges, with palaces hard by, none need fast in the midst of food, none need perish with cold near shops full of furs, that all is for all, in practice as well as theory, and that at last, for the first time in history, a revolution has been accomplished which considers the needs of the people before schooling them in their duties. This cannot be brought about by acts of parliament, but only by taking immediate and effective possession of all that is necessary to ensure the well-being of all. This is the only really scientific way of going to work, the only way to be understood and desired by the mass of the people. We must take possession in the name of the people of the granaries, the shops full of clothing, and the dwelling houses. Nothing must be wasted. We must organize without delay to feed the hungry, to satisfy all wants, to meet all needs, to produce not for the special benefit of this one or that one, but to ensure that society as a whole will live and grow. Enough of ambiguous words like the right to work, with which the people were misled in 1848 and which are still used to mislead them. Let us have the courage to recognize that well-being for all, henceforward possible, must be realized. When the workers claimed the right to work in 1848, national and municipal workshops were organized, and workmen were sent to drudge there at the rate of 1s8d a day. I think that's 1 shilling, 8. I don't know what D is. That pence? Not sure exactly. When they asked that labor should be organized, the reply was, "Patience, friends. The government will see to it. Meantime, here is your 1s8d. Rest now, brave toiler, after your lifelong struggle for food." Meantime, the cannons were trained, the reserves called out, and the workers themselves disorganized by the many methods well known to the middle classes, till one fine day they were told to go and colonize Africa or be shot down. Very different will be the result if the workers claim the right to well-being. In claiming that right, they claim the right to possess the wealth of the community, to take the houses to dwell in according to the needs of each family, to seize the stores of food and learn the meaning of plenty, after having known famine too well. They proclaim their right to all wealth, fruit of the labor of past and present generations, and learn by its means to enjoy those higher pleasures of art and science too long monopolized by the middle classes. And while asserting their right to live in comfort, they assert what is still more important, their right to decide for themselves what this comfort shall be, what must be produced to ensure it, and what discarded as no longer of value. The right to well-being means the possibility of living like human beings, and of bringing up children to be members of a society better than ours, whilst the right to work only means the right to be always a wage slave, a drudge, ruled over and exploited by the middle class of the future. The right to well-being is the social revolution. The right to work means nothing but the treadmill of commercialism. It is high time for the worker to assert his right to the common inheritance and to enter into possession.
Oh, we're on chapter 3?
We're on chapter 3.
Shit. All right. I wanted to say, I also have a hard time reading theory because everyone was talking about that. And I just think that maybe this is the new thing, is collective theory reading, in a fun way, and then maybe more people can consume theory.
This makes it a lot easier to consume theory.
Yeah.
Also,
but also, yeah. Go.
I found audiobooks extremely helpful for my
Yes.
ability to consume theory.
Same.
Yeah.
Changed my life. I also don't know if I like. I see Nat where you're going with the grift. I don't know if like that's generally true.
I do think I think to me the risk of not reading theory is repeating the
Right.
problems of future things, right? It's how to become an engaged and knowledgeable,
Mm.
you know, member of any revolution. I think
I feel like
I think
it needs an
Mhm.
additional without reading theory and without like engaging with the communities that like read and distribute. I'm sorry, split attention. Distribute
No
the theory
worries.
by talking. Fuck. Okay, not split attention anymore. Um, among themselves, among each other. Like, I think that's like the other component you need to be missing. Like, I feel like you can learn everything from community if it's the right community. That you could read, that you could learn by reading theory. That is my opinion. But you're right. That does
It is
increase
helpful
the
when people in
opportunity.
that community have read theory.
Yes. Yeah. And this is why people different and help each other. Good.
It's true.
Why use
Which
more
like
word when
also
less word good?
and also a lot of this I think about in regards to um like disability. Um like um in regards to thinking through like as he talks about like in order to, like talking about disability and that um people should have the right to well-being regardless of whether they, what their particular situation is. Um yeah. Fenrir says, I really need a level of commenting critique, that or it's me translating and describing it into plain English. So that's much more exhausting. Nat agrees with reading any work from the 19th century or earlier, TBH, or any
Mm-hmm.
translated work can often be challenging. I think that that's true. Um, I've read a lot of old lit. Um, it's not easy to read. In a lot of cases, some of it is, some of it is not.
This
Um,
seems fun to read so far to me. I don't. Maybe it's just you're doing a very good job. Listening to it is very nice. I don't know how reading it, how you're experiencing that.
reading it is a challenge only because I'm trying to make it sound nice.
You're doing a very good
Um,
job.
thank you, thank you. Yeah, it is like it's tough. I think no matter what your particular needs are, everyone has needs in regards to reading theory. Like I don't.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very small subset of people for whom reading theory is like, oh yes, I fully understand this and I've internalized it and it's easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, like
And we need those people.
and we need those people for sure, but we also need ways to make these things more
Mm-hmm.
accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Recent actual read for me was Mutual Aid by Dean Spade, which is not a perfect
Mm.
book by any means.
Love that
But
it rhymes.
but I adored the fact that it was a 4 hour long audiobook.
Oh, that's
Um,
very bite-sized.
which is extremely bite sized. I have a thing where every month I try to like read or listen to something that is like important and helpful and, often theory based or, someone's experience and stuff. Um and I nearly got to the end of September and I was like, "Oh shit, I don't have a read for this month. Oh god, oh god." I found that one. I was like, "Oh, I can do this. It's 4 hours. Easy. Easy, easy."
Cool.
Um
It's a
Fenrir,
very
that's
fast
shorter than the Phantom of
pace.
the Opera. Hmm?
It's a very fast pace for me. I read very slow. And I listen to audiobooks slow, it turns out, too. But faster than I read.
Yeah, fair. I like the audiobook experience because you can be doing something else along the way
Yes.
and it's nice.
Chores, walking,
Chores,
everything.
walking. Yeah, absolutely.
Love to
Makes it easier
multitask brain.
to focus.
Nope. I fucked up.
Does it make it
Uh,
easier to focus when you have something to listen to when you're trying to make your pies?
kind of. Like, I feel like I've turned off all the other voices because that was an important step. I feel like I'm fucking up less now.
That's good.
But yeah, I don't know. At a certain points, I just get into like this rhythmic process while I'm listening to you. So yeah, maybe it does.
That's good. That's good. Um Where are we at on money?
We have 1.7 million. We're almost at 2
growing. We're
million.
growing.
Yeah, we're growing our little empire.
Nope.
Our
It's
small
not what it.
business.
No, it's not. That was not the intention here. The
We're gonna
conquest
invest.
of pies.
We're gonna invest this in Bitcoin now. We've
No,
spent.
no. Hang on.
Now
Claire,
that
have
we've
you been
worked,
listening?
we're
were
gonna
not.
take this small investment and we're gonna flip it. We're gonna double it just overnight. Don't worry about it.
We're not going to appropriate. We're not going to appropriate Bitcoin. I'm sorry, we're not doing it.
No, never.
Okay. Chapter 3 is titled Anarchist Communism.
Let's fucking go.
So we'll probably get through section 1 and then we'll have to.
I know we have like
break.
less than 10 minutes, but yeah, we
Yeah,
can
but
like
we can
stop
get
in the
through a
middle of the
section.
chapter. Yeah, let's get through a little section.
Every society which has abolished private property will be forced, we maintain, to organize itself on the lines of communistic anarchy. Anarchy leads to communism, and communism to anarchy, both alike being expressions of the predominant tendency in modern societies, the pursuit of equality. Time was when a peasant family could consider the corn which it grew, or the woolen garments woven into the cottage, as the products of its own toil. But even then, this way of looking at things was not quite correct. There were the roads and the bridges made in common, the swamps drained by common toil, and the communal pastures enclosed by hedges, which were kept in repair by each and all. If the looms for weaving or the dyes for coloring fabrics were improved, all profited. So even in those days, a peasant family could not live alone, but was dependent in 1,000 ways on the villages or the commune. But nowadays, in the present state of industry, when everything is interdependent, when every branch of production is knit up with all the rest, the attempt to claim an individualist origin for the products of industry is absolutely untenable. The astonishing perfection attained by the textile or mining industries in civilized countries is due to the simultaneous development of 1,000 other industries, great and small, to the extension of the railroad system, to interoceanic navigation, to the manual skill of thousands of workers, to a certain standard of culture reached by the working classes as a whole, to the labors, in short, of men in every corner of the globe. Curious how this works in with like globalization of labor. That's something to talk about later.
Also a thing about how anarchism leads into communism, etc. And then we kind of got a real world example of sometimes not always true.
Yeah. The Italians who died of cholera while making the Suez Canal, or of ankylosis in the St. Gothard Tunnel, and the Americans mowed down by shot and shell while fighting for the abolition of slavery, have helped to develop the cotton industry in France and England, as well as the work girls who languish in the factories of Manchester and Rouen, and the inventor who, following the suggestion of some worker, succeeds in improving the looms. How then shall we estimate the share of each in the riches which all contribute to amass? Looking at production from this general synthetic point of view, we cannot hold with the collectivists that payment proportionate to the hours of labor rendered by each would be an ideal arrangement, or even a step in the right direction. Without discussing whether exchange value of goods is really measured in existing societies by the amount of work necessary to produce it, according to the doctrine of Smith and Ricardo, in whose footsteps Marx has followed, suffice it to say here, leaving ourselves free to return to the subject later, that the collectivist ideal appears to us untenable in a society which considers the instruments of labor as a common inheritance. Starting from this principle, such a society would find itself forced from the very outset to abandon all forms of wages. The mitigated individualism of the collectivist system certainly could not maintain itself alongside a partial communism. The socialization of land and the instruments of production. A new form of property requires a new form of remuneration. A new method of production cannot exist side by side with the old forms of consumption, any more than it can adapt itself to the old forms of political organization. The wage system arises out of the individual ownership of the land and the instruments of labor. It was the necessary condition for the development of capitalist production, and will perish with it, in spite of the attempt to disguise it as, quote, profit sharing. The common possession of the instruments of labor must necessarily bring with it the enjoyment in common of the fruits of common labor. We hold further that communism is not only desirable, but that existing societies founded on individualism are inevitably impelled in the direction of communism. The development of individualism during the last 3 centuries is explained by the efforts of the individual to protect himself from the tyranny of capital and of the state. For a time he imagined, and those who expressed his thought for him declared, that he could free himself entirely from the state and from society. By means of money, he said, I can buy all that I need. But the individual was on a wrong tack, and modern history has taught him to recognize that, without the help of all, he can do nothing, although his strong boxes are full of gold. In fact, alongside this current of individualism, we find in all modern history a tendency, on the one hand, to retain all that remains of the partial communism of antiquity, and on the other, to establish the communist principle in the 1,000 developments of modern life. As soon as the communes of the 10th, 11th, and 12th centuries had succeeded in emancipating themselves from their lords, ecclesiastical or lay, their communal labor and communal consumption began to extend and develop rapidly. The township, and not private persons, freighted ships and equipped expeditions, and the benefit arising from the foreign trade did not accrue to individuals but was shared by all. The townships also bought provisions for their citizens. Traces of these institutions have lingered on into the 19th century, and the folk piously cherish the memory of them in their legends. All that has disappeared, but the rural township still struggles to preserve the last traces of this communism, and it succeeds except when the state throws its heavy sword into the balance. Meanwhile, new organizations based on the same principle, for every man according to his needs, spring up under 1,000 different forms. For without a certain leaven of communism, the present societies could not exist. In spite of the narrowly egoistic turn given to men's minds by the commercial system, the tendency towards communism is constantly appearing, and influences our activities in a variety of ways. The bridges, for the use of all of which a toll was levied in the old days, are now become public property and free to all. So are the high roads, except in the east, where a toll is still exacted from the traveler for every mile of his journey. Museums, free libraries, free schools, free meals for children, parks and gardens open to all, streets paved and lighted, free to all, water supplied to every house without measure or stint. All such arrangements are founded on the principle, take what you need. Yeah, they sure are founded on that, and they're still all definitely in place for free.
We have less than a minute. We should probably
let's go.
Okay, we're gonna take a break here.
We'll be back.
We'll be right back. Hello.
All right.
We return.
We return to pie making and bread.
And bread. I can stop failing making pies now.
Fenrir says, shout out to the toll workers in the Coquihalla who were told the toll was removed on short notice, and suddenly some 100+ people were without their jobs. That's shitty. Yeah, shout out to them. They
sucks.
Don't deserve that.
Now imagine if we had a system in place where they didn't need the money and that they all did that because there was something they enjoyed, and then they could just apply those jobs to a new thing, because we don't. But toll keeper is also one of those non-post revolutionary jobs that we talked about.
You're right, but they could apply those. I don't know. They could apply certain skills.
What does a toll worker do? Is it like a manual toll booth? Or is it like...
That's a great question. I would ask a toll worker.
I would ask a toll worker. Hey, do we have any toll workers around?
I don't think so. I think we just have pie makers.
Okay, alright. Fine. Could we keep reading our revolutionary text then? I guess. I suppose.
Yeah, they're cashiers, kinda, as Fenrir says. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So like public service. Also, public service would be such a less of a nightmare. I would fucking hope.
And let's be clear. I bet a lot of toll workers don't want to do that.
Yes.
Don't want to be cashiers. Don't want to be that sort of thing.
So they could just do something else.
And also, it would be people may have more choice.
Exactly.
Or shorter hours, or better,
Or work with each other to like set hours instead of dictate hours or whatever the
Yes.
fuck.
Yeah, totally.
Anyways, revolutionary text.
Let's
Revolutionary
do it.
text.
The tramways and railways have already introduced monthly and annual season tickets without limiting the number of journeys taken, and two nations, Hungary and Russia, have introduced on their railways the zone system, which permits the holder to travel 500 or 1,000 miles for the same price. It is but a short step from that to a uniform charge, such as already prevails in the postal service. In all these innovations and 1,000 others, the tendency is not to measure the individual consumption. One man wants to travel 1,000 miles, another 500. These are personal requirements. There's no sufficient reason why one should pay twice as much as the other because his need is twice as great. Such are the signs which appear even now in our individualist societies. Moreover, there is a tendency, though still a feeble one, to consider the needs of the individual, irrespective of his past or possible services to the community. We are beginning to think of society as a whole, each part of which is so intimately bound up with the others that a service rendered to one is a service rendered to all. When you go into a public library, not indeed the National Library of Paris, but say into the British Museum or the Berlin Library, the librarian does not ask what services you have rendered to society before giving you the book, or the 50 books which you require, and he comes to your assistance if you do not know how to manage the catalog. By means
Just
of
100 years from now, flash forward when all libraries are privatized.
By
Sigh.
means of or not. Maybe a better world is possible.
Let's fucking go. Yeah, we can do it.
By means of uniform credentials, and very often a contribution of work is preferred, the scientific society opens its museums, its gardens, its libraries, its laboratories, and its annual conversations to each of its members, whether he be a Darwin or a simple amateur. Not huge on that framing.
Peg yourself.
Don't with those terms.
I'm an amateur.
At St. Petersburg, if you are pursuing an invention, you go into a special laboratory or a workshop where you are given a place, a carpenter's bench, a turning lathe, all the necessary tools and scientific instruments provided only you know how to use them, and you are allowed to work there as long as you please. There are the tools, interest others in your idea, join with fellow workers skilled in various crafts, or work alone if you prefer it. Invent a flying machine or invent nothing. That is your own affair. You are pursuing an idea. That is enough. In the same way, those who man the lifeboat do not ask credentials from the crew of a sinking ship. They launch their boat, risk their lives in the raging waves, and sometimes perish, all to save men whom they do not even know. And what need to know them? They are human beings, and they need our aid. That is enough. That establishes their right to the rescue. Thus, we find a tendency, eminently communistic, springing up on all sides and in various guises in the very heart of theoretically individualist societies. Suppose that one of our great cities, so egotistic in ordinary times, were visited tomorrow by some calamity. A siege, for instance. That same selfish city would decide that the first needs to satisfy were those of the children and the aged. Without asking what services they had rendered or were likely to render to society, it would first of all feed them. Then the combatants would be cared for, irrespective of the courage or the intelligence where each is displayed, and thousands of men and women would outvie each other in unselfish devotion to the wounded. This tendency exists and is felt as soon as the most pressing needs of each are satisfied, and in proportion as the productive power of the race increases. It becomes an active force every time a great idea comes to oust the mean preoccupations of everyday life. How can we doubt, then, that when the instruments of production are placed at the service of all, when business is conducted on communist principles, when labor, having recovered its place of honor in society, produces much more than is necessary to all, how can we doubt but that this force, already so powerful, will enlarge its sphere of action till it becomes the ruling principle of social life? Following these indications, and considering further the practical side of expropriation, of which we shall speak in the following chapters, we are convinced that our first obligation, when the revolution shall have broken the power upholding the present system, will be to realize communism without delay. But ours is neither the communism of Fourier and the Phalansterians, nor of the German state socialists. It is anarchist communism, communism without government, the communism of the free. It is the synthesis of the two ideals pursued by humanity throughout the ages, economic, and political liberty. That's section
We
1.
got this. We can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Fenrir in the chat says, wow, Kropotkin really said extra small and 5XL clothes should cost the same. Great. Yes, he did. Dude rocks maybe a little. Maybe a little. Just a little.
bit.
Dude rock.
Just a little bit. He
Just a
said
little
a
bit.
thing at the end that like I wanted to remember and make a comment on, and then it left my brain, so there will be no comment.
Was it is it about it is anarchist communism, communism without government, the communism of the free?
No, it was like about a minute before the end. Oh, what was it? I don't know. I don't got it. We
what
should just
was
keep
the
going.
do you know the idea?
It was before the wounded part.
Okay.
It was just a really good like reminder, slogan, idea, vibe. But the whole thing's a good vibe. Most of it.
About
anyways.
the siege or before the siege?
I don't remember the siege. We should just keep going.
All right, we'll keep going. In taking anarchy, quote unquote, for our ideal of political organization, we are only giving expression to another marked tendency of human progress. Whenever European societies have developed up to a certain point, they have shaken off the yoke of authority and substituted a system founded roughly more or less on the principles of individual liberty. And history shows us that these periods of partial or general revolution, when the governments were overthrown, were also periods of sudden progress, both in the economic and the intellectual field. Now it is the enfranchisement of the communes, whose monuments, produced by the free labor of the guilds, have never been surpassed. Now it is the peasant rising which brought about the Reformation and imperiled the papacy. And then again, it is the society, free for a brief space, which was created at the other side of the Atlantic by the malcontents from the old world. Further, if we observe the present development of civilized peoples, we see most unmistakably a movement ever more and more marked to limit the sphere of action of the government and to allow more and more liberty to the individual. This evolution is going on before our eyes, though cumbered by the ruins and rubbish of old institutions and old superstitions. Like all evolutions, it only waits a revolution to overthrow the old obstacles which block the way, that it may find free scope in a regenerated society. After having striven long in vain to solve the insoluble problem, the problem of constructing a government which will constrain the individual to obedience without itself ceasing to be the servant of society, that's all in quotes, men at last attempt to free themselves from every form of government and to satisfy their need for organization by a free contract between individuals and groups pursuing the same aim. The independence of each small territorial unit becomes a pressing need. Mutual agreement replaces law, and everywhere regulates individual interests in view of a common object. All that was once looked on as a function of the government is today called in question. Things are arranged more easily and more satisfactorily without the intervention of the state. And in studying the progress made in this direction, we are led to conclude that the tendency of the human race is to reduce government interference to zero. In fact, to abolish the state, the personification of injustice, oppression, and monarchy. We can already catch glimpses of a world in which the bonds to bind the individual are no longer laws but social habits, the result of the need felt by each one of us to seek the support, the cooperation, the sympathy of his neighbors. Assuredly, the idea of a society without a state will give rise to at least as many objections as the political economy of society without private capital. We've all been brought up from our childhood to regard the state as a sort of providence. All our education, the Roman history we learned at school, the Byzantine code which we studied later under the name of Roman law, and the various sciences taught at the universities, accustom us to believe in government and in the virtues of the state providential. To maintain this superstition, whose systems of philosophy have been elaborated and taught, all politics are based on this principle, and each politician, whatever his colors, comes forwards and says to the people, "Give me the power, and I both can and will free you from the miseries which press so heavily upon you." From the cradle to the grave, all our actions are guided by this principle. Open any book on sociology or jurisprudence, and you will find that the government, its organization, its acts, filling so large a place that we come to believe that there is nothing outside the government and the world of statesmen. The press teaches us the same in every conceivable way. Whole columns are devoted to parliamentary debates and to political intrigues. The vast everyday life of a nation is barely mentioned in a few lines when dealing with economic subjects, laws, or in diverse facts related to police cases. And when you read these newspapers, you hardly think of the incalculable number of beings, all humanity, so to say, who grow up and die, who know sorrow, who work and consume, think and create outside the few encumbering personages who have been so magnified that humanity is hidden by their shadows, enlarged by our ignorance. And yet, as soon as we pass from printed matter to life itself, as soon as we throw a glance at society, we're struck by the infinitesimal part played by the government. Balzac already remarked how millions of peasants spend the whole of their lives without knowing anything about the state, save the heavy taxes they are compelled to pay. Every day, millions of transactions are made without government intervention, and the greatest of them, those of commerce and of the exchange, are carried on in such a way that the government could not be appealed to if one of the contracting parties had the intention of not fulfilling his agreement. Should you speak to a man who understands commerce, he will tell you that the everyday business transacted by merchants would be absolutely impossible were it not based on mutual confidence. The habit of keeping his word, the desire not to lose his credit, amply suffice to maintain this relative honesty. The man who does not feel the slightest remorse when poisoning his customers with noxious drugs covered with pompous labels thinks he is honor bound to keep his engagements. Now, if this relative morality had developed under present conditions, when enrichment is the only incentive and the only aim, can we doubt its rapid progress when appropriation of the fruits of others' labor will no longer be the basis of society? Another striking fact, which especially characterizes our generation, speaks still more in favor of our ideas. It is the continual extension of the field of enterprise due to private initiatives, and the prodigious development of free groups of all kinds. We shall discuss this more at length in a chapter devoted to free agreement. Suffice it to mention that the facts are so numerous and so customary that they are the essence of the second half of the 19th century, even though political and socialist writers ignore them, always preferring to talk to us about the functions of capital G government. These organizations, free and infinitely varied, are so natural an outcome of our civilization. They expand so rapidly and group themselves with so much ease. They are so necessary a result of the continual growth of the needs of civilized man. And lastly, they so advantageously replace governmental interference that we must recognize in them a factor of growing importance in the life of societies. If they do not yet spread over the whole of the manifestations of life, it is that they find an insurmountable obstacle in the poverty of the worker, in the castes of present society, in the private appropriation of capital, and in the state. Abolish these obstacles, and you will see them covering the immense field of civilized man's activity. The history of the last 50 years furnishes a living proof that representative government is impotent to discharge the functions we have sought to assign to it. In days to come, the 19th century will be quoted as having witnessed the failures of parliamentarianism. But this impotence is becoming evident to all. The faults of parliamentarianism and the inherent vices of the representative principle are self-evident, and the few thinkers who have made a critical study of them, J.S. Mill and Leverdays, did but give literary form to the popular dissatisfaction. It is not difficult, indeed, to see the absurdity of naming a few men and saying to them, "Make laws regulating all our spheres of activity, although not one of you knows anything about them." Me when I say to a few men, "Make laws regulating all our spheres of activity, although not one of you knows anything about them."
That face win. Is this a good place to have a comment?
We got like 6 paragraphs till next chapter.
All right, let's keep going.
We are beginning to see that government by majorities means abandoning all the affairs of the country to the tide waiters who make up the majorities in the House and in election committees, to those, in a word, who have no opinion of their own. But mankind is seeking and already finding new issues. The International Postal Union, the railway unions, and the learned societies give us examples of solutions based on free agreement in place instead of law. Today, when groups scattered far and wide wish to organize themselves for some object or other, they no longer elect an international parliament of jacks of all trades. No, where it is not possible to meet directly or come to an agreement by correspondence, delegates versed in the question at issue are sent to treat with the instructions, endeavor to come to an agreement on such or such a question, and then return not with a law in your pocket, with a proposition of agreement which we may or may not accept. Such is the method of the great industrial companies, the learned societies, and the associations of every description, which already cover Europe and the United States. And such should be the method of an emancipated society. While bringing about expropriation, society cannot continue to organize itself with the principle of parliamentary representation. A society founded on serfdom is in keeping with absolute monarchy. A society based on the wage system and the exploitation of masses by the capitalists finds its political expression in parliamentarism. But a free society, regaining possession of the common inheritance, must seek in free groups and free federations of groups a new organization in harmony with the new economic phase of history. Every economic phase has a political phase corresponding to it, and it would be impossible to touch property without finding at the same time a new mode of political life. Okay. Tell me your comments, Claire.
My first comment, I don't know if I can make this comment without fucking up my pies, and I am on quite the streak right now. If I
You
do
want me to
so,
make some comments?
yeah, you should make your comments, and then I'll say when I fuck up.
It's the like.
I fucked up.
All right, go
Sorry,
ahead.
keep going. You already started.
No, I was just gonna say, the way in which like it talks about government is like super interesting, and like the text is talking about the ways in which government in its current form will always end in capitalism, which like again, he could never have predicted this. But what happened to the Soviet Union?
Yeah, uh-huh.
What is happening, you know, like
what is happening in China?
What is happening in China? What happens everywhere, right?
Uh-huh.
And as long as you have a government that is invested in Western capitalist notions of authority, which is all governments, because the functions like the United Nations and the power of the United States and other capitalist countries like Canada has to, because of those, all governments have to play on that level, have to be considered legitimate, and therefore all governments in the end turn towards this particular thing. I think a lot about like how like Fanon talks in The Wretched of the Earth about formerly colonized societies developing their own governments that end up recreating a lot of issues or going towards a lot of issues, and like the ways in which that is due to the requirements of Western powers, right? Like Roth here Kropotkin is like talking about how government does this, and the other section of this that is relevant in today's society is that the powers of the world enforce this structure being put forth because they know it will always end in capitalism that values white supremacy and colonialism and imperialism over the well-being of all.
So we just need like a truly global collective revolution of all colonial governments.
Right. But also, we can't do that. You and I cannot be the ones who, right? Because the thing is, there was a group which stated that its goal was to have a worldwide revolution towards communism, and that was the Soviet Union. What they did was imperialism.
Yeah.
Once again, the problem is so large and so unwieldy.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
There was so I'm just going to accept that I'm going to be fucking up. Earlier in the chapter there was a reference to like the farmer would not poison his own crops for fear of like basically losing the community around him that respects him. I don't know why I'm using gendered terms for this theoretical farmer.
Because the book uses
because the text uses gendered. Anyways, I'm just gonna keep. So this theoretical farmer who uses he him pronouns. Actually, I've decided this theoretical farmer uses he they. But
great.
So
tell me about the theoretical he they farmer.
This is they, them, Jesus all over again.
It is.
Okay, so my point was, there's this like mutual respect, like comment where it's like, oh yeah, like we don't work because of the capital. We work because like at the end of the day, it's about the respect. Like, or like the way you work is about the respect, not about the capital.
Yeah.
And like I'm kind of thinking like there's something sinister in the tech companies where we
Shocking.
look at shocking. We look at like Amazon as an example as arguably one of the worst companies to exist in the present day.
Yes.
There's like in specific ways. There are a lot of different companies that are worse for different reasons. But the way that like it exploits labor and whatnot, and then you have companies such as certain companies that maybe I work at, where the goal and internal messaging is we want to be more like Amazon. And it's like, do we? Like, pretty much in most, like, maybe it's not the most public conscious, but like a lot of people in maybe our echo chamber, or like most of the people in Vancouver, at least, that I've spoken to, know that Amazon sucks. But like sometimes the response is, yeah, but what are you gonna do?
Right.
But like we all like kind of know that it like isn't great. But because it is so capitalistically successful in this system, like there is the drive of like, well, we do actually want to be like that. We do want to poison our workers. Like we do want to like say fuck you to our workers. And there's like a difference between the farmer and the CEO, because the CEO doesn't have to look in the face of fellow workers and like and have them respect them. But the farmer does because of the community. And this is like a core issue of like the division of like class communities and the like creation of class communities altogether.
But also, and what's worth saying is the idea of, oh, he doesn't poison them because he doesn't want to lose the respect of the community. This has also been a frame of mind that has been appropriated by the capitalists, because the way that the framing has gone is to frame communities or to frame companies as communities. As
you are right.
The CEO does not have to be accountable to anyone, but
you wouldn't want to hurt
your fellow worker.
Yes.
And not in terms of the unionization, but in terms of if you don't if you don't overwork yourself, it's going to get put on to your coworker who's going to have to deal with it. And
do you really want the stock to fall? Think about how much money you're losing all of your fellow workers.
And there's this naturalization of it, right? There's this, and this is in general the reason why I think a lot of these ideas are difficult to fathom, of like no government, is because the naturalization of capitalism and of capitalist societies has made it seem like there is no alternative, and in many cases has made it so there is no alternative. But within companies specifically, contrasting with the idea of plenty that Kropotkin is talking about, the idea of companies and of capitalism in general is of scarcity. It is a scarcity model. And if the scarcity is not real, which given the overproduction of basically everything, they will create the scarcity. They will create, you only get this many resources for this project. You only get this much, time. These are the deadlines. You have to meet these requirements. They create scarcity to make it seem inevitable, right? And that is, they do this on the large scale, on the societal scale with governance, right? They make it so that there is no alternative, that like, okay, you get rid of the government, suddenly people who are getting their healthcare from the government, people who were relying on government services, they're fucked, right? And it makes it so that you can't get rid of the government, because the ability to build these like smaller communities that work for each other, that aren't based in this Western government logic, are impossible because of a resource distribution all going through government and corporations, which then create the scarcities, which further entrench them.
Mm-hmm.
And for what it's
mm-hmm.
worth, kill anyone who suggests anything different, like the Black Panthers,
Mm-hmm.
and the free breakfast program. As we know, that was the thing that the U.S. government was
Yep.
their biggest concern was the free breakfast program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Fenrir in the chat says, and the interesting thing to consider is that if we get rid of Amazon overnight, then so many disabled people will also be in peril. Yes,
Yep.
exactly.
And this is like earlier, like I think it was 2 episodes ago. We talked about like a revolution that doesn't like take care of like disabled people, and I feel like there's some revolutionaries that are Lord Farquaad about it, and are like, some of you may die, and this is a risk I'm willing to take.
Right.
And that is not the revolutionary who I guess should be listened to. I don't have a really pointed end to that statement, but it's fucked up.
And those revolutionaries are often the ones who are, in many cases, class reductionists, who say we don't have time to worry about race, we don't have time to worry about colonialism, who think of things like femininity and queerness as excess, as unnecessary, right? As like, these revolutionaries are the ones who say, we don't have time and space for any of that because people need bread, right? And people need more than bread, it turns out. People also need cheese with their bread.
Yeah.
And like, that is also a particular sort of like very cynical, we can't actually have it all. The thing that is most exciting to me about the conquest of bread, even if I disagree with some of the ways, and obviously contemporarily I would, because this is 120 years ago, and our knowledge of society is much different now, I do disagree with some of the ideas of like, look how much there is, we produce so much, we drain the swamps. He loves talking about draining swamps.
Wait, does he? Did I miss that?
He said
how many
like
times
4 times.
What? I've
missed
every single time.
Yeah. He talks about draining the marshes. And like, I don't think that's the best way to go about that. But I do believe in this general idea that we have more than we need. They're actually scarcity. We're so far past scarcity as a model, except when it is contrived. And this is the last thing I'm going to say on this right now. Bringing it back to Fable 3, the core choices, the bullshit moral choices, as we call them, are all based on this scarcity model. They're all based on the idea people will not fight to defend their own homes unless you pay them. And therefore, that's why we need to make all these fucking pies so that we can pay people to fight to defend their own fucking houses. When in reality, if we were to bring about a more collectivist or communist society, right? If we were to have the full range of choices, then we would be able to lead in a much different way. And Fable 3 is out here doing propaganda for the scarcity model.
Fucking go off. I'm just fucking up my pies while I'm listening because it was so good.
Not that scarcity never exists. But
no, like this is, but it is truly manufactured. I don't know if this is as pointed, and it kind of just illustrates your point on scarcity. But like as like companies, and again, I'm in tech, so my mind goes to tech companies. We're starting to see like these companies that are so large, they start to stretch themselves. And this is like how they can construct this scarcity, because it's like, oh, we're only putting 10% of our resources into, well, we're going to start going into the video game sphere because we need to put our resources somewhere. And so now we're going to make video games. I'm thinking about like Netflix. But like, Amazon has grocery deliveries now. Like they own grocery stores. Google has like smartphones and whatnot. Like every company needs to be everything. And like the bigger they are, they want to be, as we start like unironically, people start calling it, the company ecosystem. You have your
Right.
Google smartwatch, you have your Google phone, you have your Google computer. It's like, oh, everything just works. And why is that? And then because they're stretching themselves so thin, they can construct the scarcity easier.
Yes, exactly. And like the scarcities that are real and that exist, they can exploit and exacerbate and like turn and take for themselves. Say this scarcity exists, that's a great opportunity for us. We can make lots of money off of that. Because there
Mhm.
are limits to production, and in a post capitalist society, in a world that was more equitable, there would still be those limits. But if we have learned nothing from our lives, if we've learned anything from our lives, it should be that we have what we need for everyone to be taken care of. And we would need to build a society that can effectively do that without destroying the planet. And that's possible. That is possible. But the structures that exist are all laser focused on the idea that it isn't. That is all the intention, regardless of what the particulars are. The idea is someone has to suffer for it. Someone in a colonized country has to experience slave labor so that you can have clothes that you want, that you enjoy, that you need, right?
Mhm.
Which is not true because
Right.
we are massively overproducing on clothes, right?
Mhm.
And that's like one example, right?
Like if you return a piece of clothing, stores will just throw it out.
Stores will throw it out. It's not. That's because the point is not what is genuine and real and needed. The point is what can be sold, what can
Right.
be conceptualized as valuable, right?
Right.
In reality, value is a subjective proposition. What
Mhm.
is valuable to one person is not valuable to another. And for each person, they can have what they consider valuable.
Mhm.
I'm not.
Can I use that to lead into a point I wanted to make?
Absolutely.
Insulin in the US. Insulin prices in the US are the most absolutely dreadful thing I have ever heard about. No, I've heard a lot of dreadful things about the American healthcare system, but I have like a cousin
It's pretty horrific.
who is diabetic and like lives in the US. And so like I'm slightly acutely aware even though I don't live in the country.
Yeah.
And it's just like you don't have to have a scarcity model if you have a monopoly.
Yeah.
And it's like if you don't have the monopoly, you simply create the scarcity model.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like it's one or the other. Like this is like
Monopoly is a form of scarcity.
right. But it's like as soon as as soon as like we were like, oh, monopolies are bad, it's like, oh, but we figured out how to like move scarcity around to maintain value. Anyways, that's just
Yes. You're absolutely
uh,
correct. I think
uh yeah.
I think maybe we should cease for the eve.
That's
Um
fair.
I just want to say shout out to the marshes and the swamps. I know we've been reading a lot about you being drained, but you don't deserve to be drained. You're beautiful as you are.
Love
Um
you, swamps.
love you. Love you,
If you are the
swamps.
swamp creature, you are welcome here anytime. And you can
You are allowed to be a part of our community.
uh-huh.
And
I want us a community of swamp creatures, no joke. And I
hell
fucked
yeah.
up. So I think that's the last pie I'll make.
All right, last pie. What's our total for the evening, Claire?
So we sit at actually how the fuck do I check that? Where is my money? Wait, let me go back into pie making 1 second. The easiest way to check my money. We're sitting at that's so rude. If someone wants to talk to me, it won't let me like make pies. Fuck off. No. I get that everyone wants to talk to me because I'm so special and good, but also I would simply like to make pies. We end the night at 2.25 million gold.
Okay, and how much do we need in altogether?
Presently we need 7 million.
7 minus 2.25 is 4.75. So
We've got a
we're
couple
base-
more sessions of this.
We're basically on track to have all the money we need in 3 sessions. We are going at the final count on Conquest of Bread is that we are 3 chapters in. And so we would be starting chapter 4 next time. Unless we decide to do a break and do some other stuff. There are 17 chapters, so we will probably not reach the end of the book.
I mean, we might, because maybe this game is like, yes, all of your choices amount to like another $10 million that you need. And then, or 10 million gold.
We'll see. The point is,
that's the kind of heinous game this is.
The point is, if we don't make it to the end, we'll find some way to, like, you know, make it to the end eventually.
Are we doing the audiobook? We've decided we're doing the audiobook of this. The Conquest of Bread. Thank you for scrolling up.
Yeah. I don't know about the audiobook, but I'm sure there'll be some other game that comes up eventually that will have some bullshit random task we have to do over and over repeatedly.
That might be true. We do play. That is kind of the focus of our games, isn't it?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
If we have these menial tasks to do, then we can do them while reading some anarchist literature.
We have more examples of the nightmare that is like medical prices, HIV meds that cost $50 to produce but are $1,000+. Or I'm assuming MS is multiple sclerosis. I don't know if I said that right. That take $15 to produce but are $2,000 or more.
The collective could produce them. The collective could do it.
Not neuroscience. What is the I have family that make these things. Why am I the neurochemistry? That's it. Neurochemistry is a very interesting field that a lot of people very, very much enjoy and find fascinating. Like, this is a post revolution job. Neurochemistry. Yep. IMO.
Yep. Absolutely.
Is your job a post-revolution job? It's not like more valid or not because we live in a capitalist society. I just want to like think about it. Just think about it. Maybe it's depressing if you think about it.
I think that mine probably is, but it would take a slightly different form. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I do. I do know what you mean. Yeah.
I think Baker.
Yes, I think you got this. Yeah, I think you are. If you want to be making bread for forever, I think you got this. Now the question is, do you want to be making bread forever?
Maybe less making of bread, you know?
Maybe making more fun bread.
Maybe
cheese bread. Post-revolutionary version is making cheese bread. Okay, do you have any last thoughts, Brianna?
I guess my last thought is, let's save the world with pie.
Hey, I'll take a slice of that.
The Conquest of Pie, Part 1.
Good night, everybody. See you next week.
See you next